The Galactic Council gave my vampire Warbride one chance to renounce me, and she answered by stepping between my chair and 11 planetary governments as if the entire galaxy had forgotten which one of us was supposed to be afraid. Commander Seraphine Veyra, the High Arbiter, said, his voice echoing through the circular chamber. You are not being asked to defend the human. You are being ordered to release your claim. Seraphine stood perfectly still beneath the cold white lights. She was taller than me by several inches, pale as winter starlight, with long black hair falling over the shoulders of a crimson military coat and eyes the deep red of emergency beacons. 3 days earlier, I had believed those eyes were the most dangerous thing aboard the station. Now every armed guard in the chamber was watching them instead of me. There is no claim to release, she said. The Arbiter's expression tightened. The Varian Warbride registry disagrees. Then the registry is wrong. That caused more reaction than I expected. The delegates whispered behind their transparent partitions. A reptilian ambassador lowered his head. 2 members of the Lunar Trade Coalition began checking legal tablets. Somewhere above us, hundreds of cameras adjusted focus. Apparently telling the Galactic Council that its own law was wrong was not standard diplomatic etiquette. I leaned toward Seraphine. This feels like the sort of conversation where I should have received a handbook. She did not look at me. You received one. It was 900 pages. 912. That supports my complaint. For half a second, the corner of her mouth moved. Then the High Arbiter struck the silver control surface before him. A holographic record appeared above the chamber. My name floated beside hers. Daniel Reeves. Human. Civilian engineering specialist. Mortal status confirmed. Beneath it appeared her identification. Seraphine Veyra. Vampire. Commander of the 9th Night Fleet. Warbride Covenant active. I stared at the last line again, even though I had already seen it twice that morning. There, the Arbiter said. The Covenant exists. Seraphine's voice became colder. Because your clerk activated an obsolete wartime statute after Mr. Reeves boarded my evacuation vessel. He entered your personal command chamber during a declared surrender window. Because the life support corridor had collapsed. He accepted water from your hand. I slowly raised one finger. In my defense, I had been repairing an oxygen recycler for 19 hours. The High Arbiter ignored me. He then spoke the Varian phrase recorded in the Covenant. I looked at Seraphine. You told me it meant thank you. It does. Apparently it also means something else. Only under a law written before your species had left Earth. That seems like important context. Seraphine finally looked down at me. Her expression remained severe, but there was something beneath it I had not expected from the commander who had frightened half the station into silence. Regret. I did not know the registry would recognize it. You are a vampire commander. I command warships. I do not memorize ceremonial marriage law. That is strangely reassuring. The Arbiter's voice cut through our conversation. The issue is not whether the Covenant began intentionally. The issue is whether Commander Veyra intends to terminate it. Every screen in the chamber turned toward her. I suddenly understood why they had brought me here in restraints that looked decorative but locked my chair to the floor. This was not a hearing about paperwork. It was a test. The Council expected Seraphine to look at one ordinary human technician and choose the career, fleet, clan, and centuries of status waiting on the other side. I could not blame her if she did. I was 36 years old, born in Ohio, raised around machine shops and interstate rest stops, and employed by the Terran Civil Infrastructure Corps because I was good at keeping old systems alive after important people forgot to budget for replacements. I had no military rank, no noble blood, no special genetic adaptation. I still needed 8 hours of sleep, real food, breathable oxygen, and occasionally medication for motion sickness when artificial gravity behaved badly. Seraphine, according to the public file I had read after our accidental covenant, had been alive for 214 years. She had commanded ships before my great-grandfather was born. During the siege of Kalis, she had evacuated 60,000 civilians while 3 governments argued over jurisdiction. The Varian clans called her the Red Daughter of Noctis. Human engineers aboard Station Halcyon called her ma'am and moved quickly whenever she entered a room. I had called her angry after she rejected my repair estimate. She had stared at me for 12 full seconds and then approved the estimate. That had been our first conversation. Now the High Arbiter leaned forward. Commander Veyra, the Council will simplify your choice. Renounce the Warbride Covenant. Mr. Reeves will be returned to Terran jurisdiction. Your command will be restored. Your clan's sanctions will be lifted. The Ninth Night Fleet will remain under your authority. I looked at Seraphine. That sounds reasonable. Her crimson eyes narrowed. Daniel, you have 20,000 people serving under you. 23,408. Exactly. I repair environmental systems. You command a fleet. This does not require complicated math. You believe this is about arithmetic? Most disasters eventually are. The Arbiter continued. If you refuse, Commander, the Council will classify your covenant as an unauthorized interspecies military union. You will lose voting privileges, command recognition, and access to Council-controlled gates until review is complete. Seraphine said nothing. I lowered my voice. Take the offer. She looked at me. Why? Because I do not need a vampire fleet commander destroying her life over a clerical mistake. Something in her face changed. You still believe this was a clerical mistake? Was it not? She glanced toward the council dais. That was when I noticed the fear. Not mine. Hers. It lasted less than a second, but I saw it. Seraphine Veyra was not afraid of losing command. She was afraid of what would happen if I left with the council. The High Arbiter raised his hand. Final answer. Seraphine stepped forward. Every guard straightened. She removed the black insignia from the collar of her crimson coat and placed it on the floor. 23,000 lives, 2 centuries of service, and one of the most feared commands in known space seemed to rest in that tiny piece of metal. My answer is no. The chamber erupted. I stood so quickly that the restraint field caught me at the waist. Seraphine. She turned toward me. What are you doing? Correcting a mistake. By making a much larger one. Daniel, when you entered my command chamber 3 nights ago, you were not supposed to survive the evacuation. The room seemed to become quieter around me. What? The corridor failure was not an accident. Her gaze moved toward the council. Neither was your assignment to my ship. The High Arbiter rose. Commander Veyra, you are entering classified material into an open proceeding. Good. Her voice carried through the entire chamber. Then everyone may hear it. She reached down and placed one pale hand over mine. Not possessive, not ceremonial. Steady. Daniel Reeves was placed aboard my vessel because someone expected a mortal human technician to die inside a system's failure and give the council justification to seize the Ninth Night Fleet under emergency law. My mouth went dry. How do you know? Seraphine looked directly at the 11 governments watching us. Because the order assigning him to my ship was signed 6 hours after the report predicting his death. No one whispered now. No one moved. The High Arbiter's face had gone completely still. Seraphine tightened her hand around mine just enough for me to feel the decision she had already made. You asked why I will not renounce him, she said. It is because the covenant may have begun by accident, but protecting him did not. The council did not dismiss us after Seraphine exposed the death prediction. Instead, they moved us into a sealed observation chamber 3 levels beneath the hearing hall and called it protective containment, which was the kind of phrase governments used when they wanted imprisonment to sound thoughtful. I sat on a narrow bench beneath a strip of white light, while Seraphine stood near the transparent wall, watching security officers argue with legal clerks outside. The room had no windows, no personal terminals, and no obvious exit except a door that required 3 different council permissions to open. So, I said, this is what happens when you embarrass 11 governments before breakfast. It is not breakfast. My body is still on Terran station time. Your body has complained about station time since you arrived. My body has good instincts. Seraphine turned toward me. Your body also entered a collapsing maintenance corridor after evacuation alarms began. That was work. You were ordered to leave. The oxygen recycler was failing. There were automated backups. 2 of them were already offline. You knew that. I installed half the diagnostic package. Her crimson eyes narrowed. You never told me. You never asked why I was still in the corridor. I was busy getting you out of it. Fair. She crossed the room and stopped several feet away. Without her command insignia, the crimson military coat looked strangely incomplete, like part of her identity had been removed with one small piece of black metal. Daniel, what exactly happened before you boarded my ship? I leaned back against the wall. That is a broad question. Start with why the Terran Civil Infrastructure Corps sent you. Because I am good at repairing systems people keep postponing replacement for. That is not what I asked. It is the official answer. And the unofficial one. I looked at the floor. There were moments when an ordinary room could become dangerous simply because someone asked the correct question. Seraphine had been doing that to me since we met. I volunteered. Why? The Halcyon station had requested emergency environmental specialists. Your fleet was evacuating civilian sectors from the Kalis corridor. Terran contractors did not want to enter Varian military jurisdiction. Because of us. Because humans have heard stories about vampires for 300 years and apparently faster than light travel did not improve our imagination. You were afraid too. Yes. That seemed to surprise her. You boarded anyway. Fear and refusal are not the same thing. She studied me in silence. I had learned that Seraphine did not fill quiet spaces. Because she was uncomfortable. She used them like tools. Most people eventually gave her more information simply to make the silence stop. Unfortunately for her, I had grown up around mechanics. We could stand beside a broken engine for 20 minutes without speaking and consider it productive. There is more, she said. Probably. Why volunteer for a region where humans were being evacuated away from Varian control? I exhaled slowly. Because 12 years ago, I did not volunteer. The hardness in her expression changed. Explain. I was 24. Junior environmental technician on Meridian Platform 4. Seraphine knew the name. Everyone who worked civilian infrastructure knew it. The Meridian Platform accident had become a case study in how small failures became disasters when every department assumed someone else was responsible. The oxygen circulation network failed across the lower residential ring, I said. Not completely. That was the problem. The numbers looked survivable. Carbon dioxide climbed slowly. Temperature controls held. People were uncomfortable, but nothing looked dramatic enough to justify shutting down commercial operations. You were on duty? Night shift maintenance. Did you know the circulation was failing? I knew one sector had bad readings. I filed the report. Seraphine remained silent. My supervisor said the sensors were probably drifting. Operations said full evacuation would cost several million credits in docking penalties. Corporate safety said we needed more confirmation before interrupting traffic. Every individual decision sounded reasonable if you looked at it alone. And you followed procedure. Yes. My voice came quieter than I intended. I kept running diagnostics. Seraphine watched me carefully. What happened? A family housing section lost circulation faster than the models predicted. Emergency teams moved everyone out, but more than 40 people were hospitalized from exposure. I paused. One of them was my younger sister. Seraphine's face went still. I did not know you had a sister. I do. Emily. She was 19 then. Did she recover? Physically, yes. Mostly. She developed permanent respiratory sensitivity. She lives in Cincinnati now. Works remotely. Avoids off-world stations whenever she can. The council chamber suddenly felt too clean, too bright, too quiet. I was the technician who had the bad numbers 6 hours before the evacuation, I said. I told myself I had filed the report. I told myself supervisors had more authority, safety teams had better models, executives understood the consequences. All true, and still not enough. I looked at Seraphine. Exactly. You blame yourself. Not for causing the failure. For waiting. For letting authority become a substitute for judgment. She lowered her eyes for a moment. That is why you entered my maintenance corridor. Partly. You saw the recycler failing and refused to leave because the last time you trusted the system, Emily suffered. That is the unflattering version. What is the flattering version? I am committed to preventative maintenance. Seraphine stared at me for 2 seconds, then made the smallest sound that might have been a laugh if she were anyone else. You use humor when discussing things that still hurt. Humans invented several coping mechanisms. Most are less efficient. You make yourself sound ordinary. I am ordinary. You remained inside a failing environmental section to stabilize oxygen flow for 900 evacuees. That is not heroism. That is knowing which valve to close. You crossed 3 sealed decks after the council evacuation order. Because the automated controls were receiving conflicting commands. You ignored military officers. They were using the wrong maintenance schematic. You entered my command chamber without permission. Your door was open. It was open because half the ship was under emergency protocol. Then technically I followed emergency access rules. You drank from my personal flask. You handed it to me. And repeated the variant phrase I gave you. Again, I believed it meant thank you. It does mean thank you. With marriage consequences. Only during a war surrender window. Inside a commander's chamber, when water is offered directly from the commander's hand. That feels like information your culture should print on the bottle. Her expression almost softened again. Then she looked toward the sealed door. Someone knew those conditions would exist. The humor disappeared from me. You think they designed that too? I think your assignment was deliberate. Your predicted death was deliberate. Whether the covenant was anticipated, I do not know. Why me? That is what I am trying to understand. I stood and began pacing slowly. I am not important enough for this. Do not confuse rank with usefulness. I repair oxygen systems. You also have access codes for civilian infrastructure across Terran, neutral, and council stations. I stopped. Limited maintenance access. Enough to enter environmental control zones without military clearance. For repair work. Enough to be present anywhere a system's failure occurs. I looked at her. You think they wanted a human technician aboard your ship because if I died during a variant evacuation, Earth would blame your fleet? Yes. And your council would blame Terran contractors for compromising military systems? Yes. Two governments get an incident, and the Galactic Council invokes emergency oversight. You lose independent command. Exactly. I rubbed one hand over my face. That is a lot of planning around a man from Ohio who gets motion sick. Seraphine's eyes sharpened. You keep reducing your value because it makes the danger easier to accept. My value. Your predictability. That does not sound flattering. It should not. She stepped closer. Someone studied you. I felt cold despite the warm room. How closely? Closely enough to know you volunteer for failing systems. Closely enough to know you remain when evacuation orders conflict with civilian safety. Closely enough to predict that if an oxygen network began collapsing aboard my vessel, you would enter the dangerous section instead of leaving. She paused. Your weakness was not incompetence. I looked at her. It was that I would stay. Yes. That landed harder than I expected. For 12 years I had told myself the lesson from Meridian Platform 4 was simple. Never walk away when your judgment says someone needs help. I had built my career around that rule. I had taken bad contracts, missed vacations, lost relationships, and become the person coworkers called when everyone else had already gone home. I thought stubbornness made me difficult to control. Seraphine had just shown me the opposite. Predictable kindness could be manipulated as easily as fear. That is unpleasant, I said. Truth often is. You vampires really need better motivational sayings. We survive centuries. Optimism becomes exhausting. I looked at her. Why did you come for me personally? During the corridor failure? Yes. You command 23,000 people. You had officers. I saw the environmental map. That is not an answer. Her face became unreadable. The lower deck had already been marked expendable. By whom? Council Emergency Command. People were still there. I know. You ignored the designation. Yes. I realized what she was saying. You went down because they wrote off the civilians. And because your life signal remained inside the oxygen control room after everyone else had been ordered out. You did not know me. No, then why risk your position? Seraphine looked at me with a strange mixture of irritation and sadness. Because 214 years ago, before I commanded fleets, I failed to go back for someone. I did not speak. Her jaw tightened slightly. My younger brother was assigned to a mining moon during a rebellion. The evacuation order classified his sector as unrecoverable. I obeyed. Seraphine. He survived for 7 hours after I left orbit. The words were calm. That made them worse. I have spent 2 centuries becoming very efficient at protecting people before someone can order me not to. I finally understood why she had looked at me differently after dragging me from the failing corridor. Not affection. Recognition. 2 strangers from 2 species, both shaped by the same kind of failure. Trusting a system that had decided someone else was an acceptable loss. So when you saw my signal, I went back. Even though I was human. Especially because you were human. I raised an eyebrow. That sounds mildly prejudiced. You were. Aboard my ship. Your government would have blamed me if you died. Very romantic. There was nothing romantic about it. Good. We have known each other for 3 days. She gave me a look. You are impossible. Apparently, also predictable. Before she could answer, the observation chamber door unlocked. 3 council guards stood outside with a legal officer in silver robes. Daniel Reeves, the officer said, "The High Arbiter has authorized a private Terran transfer hearing. You may leave Commander Veyra's protection immediately and return to human jurisdiction. No charges will be filed against you." Seraphine went completely still. I looked at the officer. "And what happens to her?" "That is not part of your transfer." "What happens to the investigation into my assignment?" "Council security will conduct an internal review." "And the death prediction?" "Classified." "So I go home. Seraphine faces punishment for refusing the council, and you investigate yourselves." The officer's expression remained neutral. "You are mortal, Mr. Reeves. This conflict does not need to become your life." For 1 second, the offer tempted me. Earth, Ohio, Emily, real gravity, food that did not arrive in sealed nutrient trays. A future where galactic councils and vampire commanders became stories I told at bars instead of people deciding whether I remained free. Seraphine did not ask me to stay. That mattered. She simply stood beside the wall and let the choice remain mine. I looked at the officer. 12 years ago, I walked away because people with higher clearance told me they would handle the problem. I shook my head. I am not making that mistake twice. The legal officer frowned. "You are declining transfer?" "Until I know who predicted my death before I boarded that ship, yes." I heard Seraphine inhale softly behind me. The officer studied us both. "Then you should understand the council will consider your continued presence voluntary association with Commander Veyra." "Fine. That may affect your Terran employment status." "Also fine. Your access credentials may be suspended." "I have repaired oxygen lines with hand tools." "You could lose your career." I smiled. Without humor, careers can be rebuilt. Graves are much less flexible. The officer had no answer to that. He stepped back, and the door began closing again. Just before it sealed, he spoke one final sentence. "Then I recommend you prepare for the next hearing, Mr. Reeves. The council has discovered that your Meridian platform file was accessed by an unauthorized party 6 months ago." The door shut. I stared at Seraphine. 6 months. Her crimson eyes had gone cold. "Your assignment to my fleet was approved 5 months ago." I felt every piece fall into place at once. Someone had not merely chosen an expendable human technician. They had chosen the one human technician whose oldest wound guaranteed he would walk directly into the trap. The next hearing began with a lesson in vampire marriage law, which was not how I had expected my 4th day in deep space to go. Seraphine and I were escorted from protective containment into a smaller council chamber shaped like a half-circle, with black glass walls overlooking the central spine of Station Halcyon. Beyond the glass, civilian ships moved between docking arms while the enormous shadow of the Ninth Night fleet hung several miles away under temporary council lockout. 23,408 crew members were still aboard those vessels, but Seraphine was no longer allowed to issue a single command to them. That fact seemed to bother her less than the silver-robed legal historian waiting beside the central table. "Commander Veyra," the historian said, "before this inquiry proceeds, the Council requires formal clarification of the Warbride covenant." Seraphine's expression became colder. "Daniel is not my Warbride." The historian looked toward me. "Under Varian translation standards, the term is gender-neutral. That somehow makes this less strange and more strange at the same time." Seraphine gave me a warning look. "Daniel, I am listening." The historian activated a holographic legal archive. A dark red symbol appeared between us. 2 vertical lines joined by a circle at the center. The covenant predates the Galactic Council by approximately 1100 years. It was created during the Varian Succession Wars, when military commanders frequently accepted surrendered enemies, refugees, medics, and civilians into protected command shelters. I looked at Seraphine. "So this began as a refugee law?" "Partly," she said. The historian continued. "Under the original statute, a person entering the private shelter of a Varian war commander during an active surrender interval could receive direct personal protection if 3 conditions were fulfilled. First, the commander voluntarily offered water or sustenance. Second, the guest accepted. Third, the guest spoke the protected acknowledgement. The phrase Seraphine taught me. Correct. Which still means thank you. Correct. Your species really buried the important part. At the time, the historian said, everyone who spoke Varian understood the context. That defense gets weaker after 11 centuries. Seraphine almost smiled, but the historian had already opened another layer of the archive. The fourth condition was introduced later. If the protected guest remained inside the commander's shelter during an active war declaration, the protection became reciprocal. I stopped joking. Reciprocal how? The commander became responsible for the guest's safety. The guest became legally protected against transfer, forced conscription, political execution, or use as bargaining property. In exchange, the guest could not knowingly assist an attack against the commander's civilian dependents. That sounds less like marriage. It was not originally marriage. Seraphine folded her arms. The council translation is deliberately misleading. The historian hesitated. That was enough to make me look at him. Deliberately? Seraphine answered. Centuries later, noble houses began using the protection covenant to legitimize wartime unions between commanders and political hostages. The word changed, and now everyone calls it Warbride. Yes, even when no marriage exists. Yes. I stared at the Galactic Council seal above the chamber. Convenient for dramatic hearings. The historian ignored that. Modern Varian law separates the covenant into 3 layers. Shelter protection, war bond recognition, voluntary union. Which one are we? War bond recognition. Seraphine's head turned sharply. No, Commander. The registry activated the 2nd layer when you refused surrender of Mr. Reeves before the full council. I looked at her. Your refusal upgraded it. Apparently. You did know that part. I suspected. That is not comforting. The historian enlarged the symbol. The circle between the 2 lines now contained a 2nd ring. A commander who publicly refuses lawful transfer of a protected mortal declares that the guest's person is no longer subject to ordinary wartime jurisdiction until the covenant is reviewed. Mortal, I said. You keep emphasizing that word. Because it matters. Seraphine's expression changed. Tell him. The historian looked uncomfortable. Varian law was written for long-lived species. Humans create complications. We have a talent for those. The mortality clause states that if one party has a projected lifespan less than 1/4 of the other, the longer-lived party assumes increased legal responsibility for consent, property, inheritance, medical autonomy, and political coercion. I blinked. Projected lifespan. Your average remaining natural lifespan is approximately 45 to 55 Terran years. Commander Veyra may live several centuries more. I looked at Seraphine. How many? Potentially. That is not a number. More than you. Useful. The historian continued. The clause exists because a long-lived commander can accumulate wealth, military authority, and social pressure far beyond anything available to a mortal partner. The law therefore assumes imbalance unless the shorter-lived party retains independent status. I leaned forward. So the law protects me from her. Yes. Seraphine looked offended by the wording. It protects both parties from coercion. But mostly me. Yes. I am beginning to respect ancient vampires. Do not say that too loudly, she replied. They will make you attend ceremonies. The historian cleared his throat. There is another consequence. There always is. A new section appeared. While warbond recognition is active, Commander Veyra cannot legally order Mr. Reeves aboard any vessel under her authority. Seraphine nodded. Reasonable. She cannot assign him work. Also reasonable. She cannot restrict his communication with Earth, Terran authorities, or independent council. Good. She cannot receive his salary, property, inheritance, or contractual labor. Very good. And she cannot use military personnel to prevent him from leaving her protection if he chooses to leave voluntarily. I looked at Seraphine. You really have almost no control over me. I noticed. That must be difficult. Almost unbearable. You are adapting. The historian did not share our amusement. However, Mr. Reeves also acquires obligations. There it is. You may not accept military compensation from any government seeking influence over Commander Veyra while the war bond remains active. Fine. You may not transmit private command information learned solely through protected access. Reasonable. You may not enter a competing protection covenant. I paused. Meaning? Seraphine answered. You cannot accidentally marry another vampire commander while this is unresolved. I stared at her. I was not planning to make this a recurring workplace problem. Good. Anything else? The historian changed the display. The most dangerous provision concerns command succession. Seraphine's posture became rigid. That law should not apply. The council believes it may. Of course it does, I said. The historian continued. Commander Veyra is not merely commander of the Ninth Night Fleet. She is the senior military heir of House Veyra, one of the 7 Nocturne houses recognized under Council Treaty. I looked at her. You forgot to mention noble military heir. It was not relevant to oxygen repair. It feels relevant now. I dislike discussing my family. That makes 2 of us. The historian opened a star map. 7 crimson regions appeared along the Veyrian frontier, each connected by council-controlled transit gates. The Nocturne houses were granted semi-autonomous fleet authority after joining the Galactic Council. In exchange, they agreed that hereditary command could not be transferred to foreign governments. I am not a government. No. But under the War Bond Succession Clause, a recognized protected mortal may become a civilian continuity witness if the commander is removed. Translate that. Seraphine did. If the council strips me of command while our covenant remains active, you gain the right to testify before House Veyra chooses my replacement. That does not sound powerful. It is. Why? Because succession hearings are normally closed to outsiders. The historian nodded. Mr. Reeves would become the first human civilian in council history with guaranteed standing inside a Nocturne succession review. I stared at the map. So if you lose your fleet because you protected me, I get a legal seat in the room deciding who gets it next. Yes. That seems designed to make everyone hate me. Now you understand why the delegates were whispering. I looked through the black glass at the fleet outside. 9 enormous warships, support vessels, hospital carriers, civilian transports, and thousands of people suddenly connected to an Ohio engineer because an ancient law had been translated badly for centuries. Can we terminate the war bond? I asked. The historian nodded. Yes. Either party may request dissolution. Seraphine looked at me, but said nothing. What happens then? Protection ends after a 48-hour cooling period. Mr. Reeves returns to ordinary Terran jurisdiction. Commander Veyra becomes eligible for command restoration pending review. That sounds simple. There is one condition. Naturally, during the cooling period, both parties must remain physically independent. No shared quarters. No direct transfer of money or orders. No private medical authority. No military escort chosen solely by Commander Veyra. Why? To prove dissolution is voluntary. And if either side is under threat, neutral council security is assigned. Seraphine's eyes became hard. The same council security that assigned Daniel to my ship. The historian did not answer. I understood why she had refused so quickly in the first hearing. Dissolving the covenant would not simply free us from embarrassing ancient law. It would place me under the protection of the institution that had already predicted my death. Who controls neutral security? I asked. The Galactic Office of Treaty Stability. Who signed my assignment to Seraphine's fleet? The historian looked toward the council observer behind him. That information remains classified. Then I have another question. Who authorized access to my Meridian platform file 6 months ago? Silence. Seraphine stepped closer to the table. Answer him. The historian's face tightened. The access credential belonged to the Office of Treaty Stability. I felt the room go colder. The same office that would guard me if I dissolved the covenant. Yes. Seraphine's voice became almost frighteningly calm. And who directs that office? The historian hesitated. High Arbiter Cale Morvain. The same man who had ordered Seraphine to release me. The same man who had offered her command back if she did. I looked through the glass toward the central tower of Station Halcyon. So our safest legal option hands me directly to the office that studied my past. That is one interpretation, the historian said. It is the obvious interpretation. An alarm chimed softly from the legal table. The historian checked the message and went pale. Seraphine noticed. What happened? A council petition has been filed. Against whom? Both of you. My name appeared beside Seraphine's again. Underneath it, a new status line formed. Warbound parties under compulsory dissolution review. I looked at the historian. You just said either party could choose dissolution. Normally. What changed? The council invoked the Mortal Protection Statute. Seraphine's eyes narrowed. On what basis? The historian read silently for several seconds before answering. They claim your emotional interest in Mr. Reeves creates an unacceptable power imbalance. I looked at her. Emotional interest? Seraphine looked ready to object, but the historian continued. The petition states that a 214-year-old vampire fleet commander cannot form a legally independent covenant with a 36-year-old mortal subordinate without presumptive coercion. I was never her subordinate. You worked aboard her command vessel as a Terran civilian contractor. The council argues operational hierarchy still existed. Seraphine placed both hands on the table, then allowed Daniel independent counsel and let him testify. The petition requests his testimony be taken separately. By whom? The historian looked at me. High Arbiter Morvain. Seraphine's entire posture changed. No, Commander, you cannot block the interview. I am not blocking it. Daniel decides. Everyone looked at me. There it was again. The strange center of the law Seraphine had nearly destroyed her career to preserve. She had extraordinary strength, centuries of experience, a noble bloodline, and 23,000 people who once moved when she gave an order. Yet under the covenant, the one thing she could not legally do was choose for me. Do I have the right to refuse a private interview? I asked. Yes, the historian said reluctantly. Can I demand a public one? Under Warbride law, yes. Then I want the entire council present. Seraphine looked at me. Daniel, public testimony will expose details of your Meridian history. They already used it to select me. Your sister may become part of the record. That stopped me. Emily had spent 12 years trying to make Meridian platform for a closed chapter. She did not deserve to become evidence in somebody else's political war. The council knew that. They had found the one place where my instinct to expose everything collided with my instinct to protect someone. The historian's terminal chimed again. He stared at the new message. Mr. Reeves, the council has added a condition. What condition? If you refuse private testimony, they will subpoena the full Meridian Platform medical archive, including your sister's sealed records, to determine whether your judgment is influenced by unresolved trauma. I felt anger arrive so quietly it frightened me. Seraphine looked at me, then at the observer. They are threatening his family. They are establishing psychological context. No, I said. They are teaching me the rules. The historian looked confused. I stood. This whole system is built around leverage. Command leverage. Lifespan. Leverage. Jurisdiction leverage. Family leverage. The ancient covenant assumes powerful people will eventually try to turn protection into control, so it keeps asking one question. Seraphine watched me. Which question? I looked at the legal symbol between us. Who still gets to choose? The chamber door opened. High Arbiter Cale Morvain stood outside with 6 council officers, calm and immaculate in silver robes. Daniel Reeves, he said, I suggest you choose carefully. Seraphine moved beside me, not in front of me. That distinction mattered. Morvain looked from her to me. The law may protect a mortal from his Warbride, Mr. Reeves. It does not protect him from his own mistakes. I met his eyes. Then it is fortunate I am getting better at recognizing when powerful people want to make my decisions for me. His smile disappeared. Behind him, the council officers activated a new legal seal. For the first time, Seraphine looked genuinely alarmed. Daniel, she said quietly, that symbol is not for dissolution. What is it? Her crimson eyes remained fixed on the seal. Council nullification, meaning, if they prove our covenant threatens galactic stability, they can erase it without either of our consent. Morvain stepped into the chamber, and once it is erased, Commander Veyra returns to council command. His eyes moved to me. You return to us. High Arbiter Morvain expected the nullification seal to frighten me into cooperation. Instead, it made the situation simple enough that even an engineer could understand it. If Seraphine and I chose separately, the council could pressure us separately. If they erased the covenant, Seraphine returned to a command structure already using her fleet as political leverage, and I returned to the office that had studied my sister's medical history, predicted my behavior, and apparently calculated the most likely place for me to die. I looked at the silver symbol floating above Morvain's hand. What exactly do you need to prove to nullify it? The legal historian answered before Morvain could. That the covenant is either coercive, fraudulent, or destabilizing to intergovernmental security. Coercive means. Seraphine forced me. Correct. Fraudulent means one of us deliberately activated an invalid law. Correct. And destabilizing? The historian hesitated. Morvain answered. The Galactic Council is not required to preserve a private bond that threatens peace among member governments. That is broad. It is necessarily broad. Those are usually the dangerous laws. Seraphine's crimson eyes stayed fixed on Morvain. Daniel, do not antagonize him. You antagonized 11 governments yesterday. I have more experience. That is not the defense you think it is. Morvain stepped closer. Mr. Reeves, this can end without further difficulty. State that you did not knowingly enter the Covenant. State that Commander Veyra's continued protection places inappropriate pressure upon you. The nullification will be granted. You will be transferred to Terran custody. Whose Terran custody? Council-approved Terran security. Under treaty stability? Morvain did not answer. I nodded. Thought so. Seraphine turned toward me. Daniel. Her voice was quiet enough that only I could hear. You do not have to fight this because of me. I know. If you state that the Covenant was accidental, you will be telling the truth. The beginning was accidental. That may be enough. And then what happens to you? That is irrelevant. You keep saying that about things that are very obviously relevant. Her jaw tightened. My command, my house, my reputation, all of it existed before you arrived and will continue after you leave. You really know how to make a person feel special. I am trying to make you feel free. That stopped me. There was no accusation in her expression, no demand. She was doing the exact opposite of what Morvain was doing. He kept offering me choices with consequences hidden behind classified doors. Seraphine was showing me the cost, and still asking me to walk away if I wanted. I looked at the legal historian. If I say the Covenant began accidentally, but I choose to continue it now, what happens? The room changed. The historian looked at Seraphine. Morvain looked at him. Seraphine looked at me. Daniel, she said carefully, do not answer questions. You have not finished understanding. That is why I asked. The historian lowered his voice. A voluntary reaffirmation would materially weaken the coercion argument. Morvain interrupted. It would not prevent nullification under Galactic Stability Review. I did not ask whether it prevented anything. I asked what happens. The historian swallowed. Under Varian War law, an accidental shelter covenant can be transformed into an intentional reciprocal bond if the mortal guest knowingly performs the return gesture. Seraphine closed her eyes for 1 second. Of course you are telling him this now. Return gesture? I asked. The protected guest offers the commander sustenance in return and states independent intent to remain under mutual shelter. That sounds ceremonial. It is. What kind of sustenance? Traditionally water. I looked at Seraphine. She was staring at the legal historian with the expression of someone considering whether centuries of legal history could be personally offensive. The flask, I said. Seraphine looked at me. No, you still have it. Daniel, you carried it into the first hearing. It is part of my field equipment. So yes. Morvain's voice hardened. This discussion is irrelevant. Any reaffirmation performed after council intervention would itself be subject to review. I looked at him. Then why are you trying so hard to stop us discussing it? He became very still. The historian suddenly seemed fascinated by his own terminal. I turned back to Seraphine. What does the return gesture actually do? It changes the legal meaning of the covenant. From accidental protection to what? Mutual war shelter. Still not marriage. No, still no ownership. Absolutely not. Still no military command over me. Correct. What changes? Seraphine did not answer immediately. I become protected by you in limited civilian matters. I stared at her. I protect you? Legally. From what? Forced reassignment caused solely by the Covenant. Compulsory medical examination intended to prove emotional instability. Planned seizure of my personal property. Political confinement without independent review. So the law protects the powerful commander from retaliation for protecting the weak guest. In simple terms, that seems surprisingly balanced. It was written by people who had survived rulers. Morvain stepped forward. And it creates a direct legal conflict with council command authority. That is why the provision has not been used in 3 centuries. I looked at him. There it is. There what is? The part you actually care about. Seraphine's gaze sharpened. I continued. You do not care whether she is manipulating me. You care that if I knowingly reaffirm the covenant, she becomes harder for you to control. Morvain's expression did not change, but the legal historian looked down. That was confirmation enough. Mr. Reeves, Morvain said. You are a civilian technician interpreting constitutional law after 3 days inside Varian jurisdiction. Correct. You do not understand the consequences. Then explain them. A mutual war shelter between a House Veyra military heir and a Terran citizen would trigger review across 11 member governments. Because I am human? Because you are mortal, foreign, civilian, and politically unaligned. That sounds like 4 different ways of saying, I am not useful to your hierarchy. Seraphine almost smiled. Morvain did not. It could delay command succession. It could affect gate access. It could cause member states to question whether Varian military authority remains compatible with council oversight. Because one vampire commander protected one repair technician. Because precedent matters. Finally, something we agree on. I turned towards Seraphine. Give me the flask. No, I blinked. That was direct. You are angry. Yes. You are reacting to a threat against your sister. Also yes. Then you are not making a clean decision. You do not get to decide that. I know. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. But I can refuse to provide the object that makes an impulsive decision irreversible. I stared at her. Irreversible? The historian cleared his throat. Not permanently irreversible. That sentence is terrible. A reaffirmed mutual shelter cannot be nullified through ordinary administrative review for 30 days. It can still be dissolved by either participant afterward. And during those 30 days? The Council cannot transfer either party solely on covenant grounds without an independent tribunal. Morvain's voice became sharp. Enough. The silver nullification seal expanded across the chamber. Daniel Reeves, you will be interviewed separately. Commander Veyra will return to military review. This conversation is concluded. Council officers moved toward the door. Seraphine shifted slightly beside me. She did not step in front of me. She did not reach for a weapon. She simply looked at the officers and said, Daniel has not consented to separation. Morvain answered, Nullification review overrides ordinary war bond proximity rights. The historian looked up suddenly. Not before a coercion finding. Morvain turned toward him. Excuse me. The historian looked terrified but continued. The statute permits controlled separation after preliminary coercion evidence is entered. No such evidence has been entered. I looked at Seraphine. I like him. Do not encourage the historian. Morvain's face hardened. Then I enter preliminary evidence now. Commander Veyra personally retrieved Mr. Reeves from a restricted environmental sector. She provided water. She brought him into her private command chamber. She later prevented his transfer. She surrendered command privileges after knowing the covenant existed. These actions demonstrate escalating personal attachment and therefore presumptive influence. Seraphine stared at him. You just classified rescue as evidence of coercion. I classified a pattern. Convenient, I said. Morvain ignored me. The nullification seal changed from silver to white. Separation authorized. The door opened. 2 neutral officers entered. Mr. Reeves, come with us. Seraphine looked at me. Go. I stared at her. You were arguing against this 10 seconds ago. Because I believed you still had legal choice. Now they have manufactured authority. Fighting the room will not help you. And you? I will manage. There was that phrase again. The kind people used when they wanted you to leave before you saw the cost. I started. Toward the door. Morvain relaxed slightly. That was his mistake. Halfway across the chamber, I noticed something on the evidence table. Seraphine's field flask. Council security had removed it from her coat during entry and placed it among the inventoried personal items. Small. Black. Scratched along one side from years of use. The same flask she had handed me while emergency lights flashed in her command chamber 3 nights earlier. I stopped. Seraphine immediately understood what I was looking at. Daniel, it is evidence inventory. Do not. Does it still contain water? That is not relevant. Historian. The man glanced at the inventory record. Approximately 6 ounces. Daniel. Seraphine's voice carried warning now. I looked at her. You said I should not decide while angry. Yes. Fair. I took a breath. I thought about Emily. Meridian Platform 4. The 6 months of hidden file access. The assignment approved 5 months ago. The corridor failure. Seraphine coming back when Council Command had already marked the deck expendable. I thought about the offer to go home and how desperately part of me wanted to take it. Then I thought about why I had stayed. Not because I trusted Seraphine completely. I barely knew her. Not because I believed an ancient vampire covenant meant destiny. I did not. I stayed because every person trying to separate us had refused to answer the same basic question. Who decided I was expendable? I looked at Seraphine. If I do this, can you order me to remain with you? No. Can you claim my work? No. My money? No. Can you stop me from going back to Earth after the review? No. Can you force this into marriage? Her expression almost became offended. No. Can the council separate us for 30 days solely because they dislike the bond? The historian answered, not without independent judicial finding. I nodded. That is enough. Seraphine stepped forward. Daniel, knowing the legal terms does not mean you owe me reaffirmation. I know. You owe me nothing for going back into that corridor. I know. You do not owe me loyalty because I surrendered command. I know. Then why? I looked at her. Because this is the first option anyone has offered me that leaves both of us with the right to say no later. Silence settled over the chamber. Even Morvain seemed to understand what had just happened. He had tried so hard to prove Seraphine's protection was coercive that he had forced me to identify the one legal mechanism built entirely around continued consent. I reached for the flask. One of the officers moved to stop me. The legal historian spoke quickly. Evidence property may be released to its owner. I looked at Seraphine. Will you take it? Her crimson eyes remained on mine. Yes. The officer handed the flask to her. She held it, but did not open it. Last chance to reconsider. You are very bad at recruiting husbands. This is not marriage. I know. I am trying to reduce tension. It is not working. That is also familiar. She unscrewed the cap. Her hand was completely steady. Mine was not. You have to offer it voluntarily, I said. Yes. Do you? She looked at me for several seconds. For the first time since I met her, Commander Seraphine Veyra looked uncertain. Not weak. Not afraid. Simply aware that power meant less in this moment than permission. She held the flask toward me. Daniel Reeves, you may share my shelter if you choose. I took it. I drank only a small amount, then stopped. Now the return gesture. You offer it back. That seems almost disappointingly simple. Old laws often are. I held the flask toward her. Seraphine Veyra, I remain because I choose to. No command. No debt. No ownership. Mutual shelter until we learn who built this trap. Her eyes widened slightly. The historian whispered, that wording is sufficient. Seraphine accepted the flask from my hand and drank. The room changed instantly. Not magically. Legally. Every terminal flashed dark red. The nullification seal shattered into separate lines of light. A new status appeared across the council archive. Voluntary reaffirmation recorded. Mutual war shelter active. 30-day independent review required. High Arbiter Morvain stared at the display. You have no idea what you just did. I looked at Seraphine. Apparently, I gave her water. You challenged. Council jurisdiction. That sounds less refreshing. Seraphine was not looking at Morvain. She was looking at me with an expression I could not yet name. Respect was there. Surprise, too. Something warmer had begun behind both, but neither of us was foolish enough to call it love after 4 days. Morvain pointed toward the new status. Do you understand what mutual shelter means under House Veyra law? I looked at the historian. He had gone pale again. There is more. There is always more. Seraphine closed her eyes briefly. Daniel. What? The historian answered. A mortal who voluntarily returns the commander's water during active council challenge is no longer recorded merely as protected guest. Then what am I recorded as? The legal archive translated the ancient Veyrian term before anyone could stop it. Recognized war companion. Eligible for Warbride union upon mutual consent. I stared at the words. Eligible. Seraphine looked at Morvain. Do not start. I was going to ask whether that means married. It does not. Good. But every Nocturne house will receive the notice. I looked through the black glass toward the massive Ninth Night fleet hanging beyond Station Halcyon. One by one, crimson lights appeared across the ships as House Veyra systems received the ancient legal declaration. How many people is every Nocturne house? I asked. Seraphine's expression became grim. Approximately 9 billion. I looked at the flask between us. That is an impressive audience for sharing 6 ounces of water. Then the station alarms changed tone. Not emergency alarms. Arrival signals. The legal historian stared at the new traffic report. 7 Nocturne delegations have requested immediate docking clearance. Morvain's face went cold. Seraphine looked toward the stars beyond the glass. They are not coming to congratulate us. I assumed. Daniel, House Veyra now has to decide whether a mortal human is permitted to remain my recognized war companion. And if they say no, her crimson eyes return to me. Then the Galactic Council will no longer be the most dangerous authority asking me to give you up. The first Nocturne delegation docked 11 minutes after the war companion notice reached the outer system, and by the time the 7th requested clearance, Station Halcyon had stopped pretending this was still an ordinary legal dispute. Civilian traffic was rerouted away from the central spine. Council observers filled the upper galleries. House banners appeared across secure channels that had been quiet for decades. The legal historian stood beside the black glass wall, watching crimson icons multiply across the orbital display. 7 houses answered in less than 20 minutes, I said. Is that normal? No, Seraphine replied. Comforting. They did not come because of you. That is somehow less comforting. She looked toward the approaching vessels. They came because House Veyra has not activated a voluntary mortal war companion in 412 years. So I am historically inconvenient. Extremely. I should put that on a resume. High Arbiter Morvain stood near the chamber entrance with 4 council officers, his silver robes immaculate despite the fact that his jurisdiction had just been challenged by an ancient law older than his government. Commander Veyra, he said, you will remain here until House Review concludes. Seraphine turned toward him. I am no longer under your military command. Your fleet remains under council suspension. My fleet is not the same thing as my house. Morvain's expression tightened. Your distinction is administrative. Seraphine's crimson eyes sharpened. That sentence has ended empires. I looked at her. You have been saving that one. 2 centuries. Worth the wait. The station lights dimmed before Morvain could respond. At first I thought another system had failed. Habit made me look toward the environmental display. Oxygen stable. Pressure stable. Gravity stable. Then every transparent wall in the chamber turned black except the section facing the stars. A single crimson symbol appeared there, much larger than the war companion mark. Seraphine stopped breathing for 1 second. What is that? I asked. The historian answered quietly. House Veyra has assumed ancestral channel priority. Morvain stepped toward the control table. Council communications outrank clan channels on Halcyon. Not during a succession or covenant dispute involving a recognized house heir, the historian said. The founding treaty reserved private review. Cancel it. I cannot. Then transfer the chamber. You cannot. Morvain looked at him. Explain. The historian swallowed. The station itself is honoring Veyra jurisdiction. I turned toward Seraphine. Your family can take over a Galactic Council station? No, that sounds very much like what is happening. They can temporarily isolate treaty chambers built with Nocturne infrastructure. How much of this station was built with Nocturne infrastructure? The historian looked at his terminal. Approximately 31%. I stared at Seraphine. Your species really does hide important details in paperwork. Humans taught the Council's standardized contracts. I withdraw my criticism. A voice filled the chamber. Female. Old. Calm. Seraphine Veyra. Seraphine straightened instinctively. The black wall became transparent again, revealing a woman standing inside a distant ceremonial hall. She looked perhaps 50 by human standards, with silver black hair, pale skin, and crimson eyes so dark they were nearly brown. She wore no crown, only a long charcoal robe marked with a narrow red line at the collar. Behind her stood a ring of silent figures. Seraphine's expression changed in a way I had never seen before. She looked younger. Not physically. Emotionally. Matriarchal Alara. You have created noise. I leaned slightly toward Seraphine. She sounds pleased. She is not. Alara's eyes shifted toward me. Daniel Reeves. Yes, ma'am. Seraphine glanced at me. Do not call her ma'am. Alara's mouth moved almost imperceptibly. Human manners. Keep them. Thank you. Do not thank me yet. That also feels familiar. Alara looked back at Seraphine. The War Companion Registry confirms voluntary reaffirmation. Do you contest the record? No. Do you claim coercion? No. Do you claim the mortal misunderstood the covenant? Seraphine looked toward me. He understood the part that mattered. Which part? That either of us may leave after. Independent review. That neither owns the other. That neither may command the other through the bond. Alara nodded once. Then why is the Galactic Council attempting nullification? Morvain stepped forward. Because the Covenant now affects intergovernmental stability. Alara looked at him as if he were a mislabeled maintenance container. I did not ask you. The room became very quiet. Morvain was High Arbiter of 11 governments. Alara had dismissed him with 5 words. I looked at Seraphine. I see where you get it. Daniel. Quiet. Understood. Alara continued. Seraphine, House Veyra requests your answer. Will you surrender the mortal to council review if House Law rejects his recognition? Seraphine did not hesitate. No. The crimson symbol behind Alara brightened. Several figures in the ceremonial hall shifted. Morvain spoke immediately. There. Open defiance. Commander Veyra has admitted she will place one human above galactic law. Seraphine turned toward him. I said I will not surrender him. I did not say he must stay with me. She looked at Alara. If Daniel chooses Terran custody under independent authority, I will not prevent him. If he chooses neutral passage, I will not prevent him. If he chooses to dissolve the bond after review, I will accept it. What I will not do is hand him to the office that selected him as a disposable trigger for my fleet seizure. Alara watched her for several seconds. And if protecting him costs you the 9th Night Fleet? Then someone else commands it. Your inheritance? Then someone else carries it. Your house standing? If House Veyra requires obedience to a fraudulent council order, I do not want the standing. The figures behind Alara began whispering. I looked at Seraphine. Until that moment, I had understood her power mostly through other people's reactions. Officers stood straighter around her. Council delegates measured every word. Her file listed campaigns, evacuations, and political authority. But she had still seemed like one commander against a system large enough to strip away everything she had. Then Alara asked one final question. And if the council attempts to take Daniel by force of jurisdiction despite his refusal? Seraphine became completely still. Then I invoke Nocturne Shelter. Morvain's face changed. The legal historian whispered something I did not catch. The star map behind us lit up at once. 9 ships of the 9th Night Fleet remained under council suspension, their external navigation lights dark. Then, one by one, crimson bands illuminated along their hulls. Not military lights. House markings. The effect moved outward through the system. Docking stations. Medical carriers. Civilian support vessels. Old relay satellites. Even sections of Halcyon itself. What did you do? I asked. Seraphine looked at the map. Nothing yet. That answer is getting old. Alara's voice remained calm. Nocturne Shelter predates council military authority. A recognized house heir may invoke it when a protected guest is threatened with transfer into compromised custody. The historian added, it converts military assets owned by the house into neutral shelter infrastructure for the duration of review. I stared at the fleet. Her warships become shelters? Legally, that sounds like a large loophole. It was created after an emperor used military jurisdiction to remove civilian witnesses from protected ships. Morvain stepped forward. The council will not recognize this abuse. Alara looked at him. Your founding treaty already does. The 9th Night Fleet changed status on the display. Council military suspension active. House shelter authority active. Neutral transfer prohibited without guest consent. I looked at Seraphine. You can do that to all 9 ships. House Veyra owns the hulls. The council commissions military command. So they can suspend your command, but not erase your family's ownership. Correct. How many people are aboard? 23,408. And they are now what legally? Shelter personnel, unless they individually decline. You turn an entire fleet into a legal safe house. The law did. You invoked the law. Yes. That counts. Morvain looked furious, but no one in the chamber moved against us. He could not. Not without making the very point Seraphine had spent 4 days forcing into. Public view. If the council tried to seize me after I refused transfer, every action would now be recorded as interference with an ancient shelter right recognized in their own founding treaty. Alara turned toward Daniel. Human. That is me. You appear less frightened than expected. I am from Ohio. We have homeowners associations. Seraphine closed her eyes briefly. Alara stared at me for 2 long seconds, then actually smiled. I understand why she kept you. She did not keep me. The smile vanished. The room became quiet again. I realized too late that I had corrected the head of one of the most powerful vampire houses in the galaxy. Explain, Alaris said. Seraphine did not keep me. She gave me choices. More than the council did. I looked toward Morvain. If she had told me what to decide, I would have walked away. If the law had made me property, I would have dissolved it. If the bond required loyalty to her house, I would refuse it. I stayed because every time someone tried to control the outcome, she was the one person in the room who kept asking what I wanted. Alaris studied Seraphine. Is that true? Yes. Interesting. She looked toward the other house representatives. Then began the recognition review. 7 symbols appeared around the chamber. Each represented one nocturne house. Morvain immediately objected. This proceeding cannot occur on a council station without council oversight. Alara answered, observe if you wish. You do not vote. This concerns galactic security. Then perhaps galactic security should learn how consent works. Seraphine looked toward me. Now you know where I get it. I was going to say that. The first house representative appeared, Lord Cashin, or severe and silver-haired. Daniel Reeves, mortal human. Do you understand Commander Veyra may survive you by several centuries? Yes. Do you understand house politics may place pressure on your work, family, and citizenship? I am beginning to. Do you seek wealth through this covenant? No title. No fleet access. I already had maintenance access. It nearly killed me. Seraphine gave me a look. Cashin continued. Do you seek transformation into a vampire? No, that caused visible surprise. You answer quickly. Because no one offered it, and I am not making life decisions based on theoretical immortality. Would you accept it if Seraphine offered? That sounds like a question for a year, when we have known each other longer than 4 days. Alara's eyes brightened with amusement. Seraphine looked relieved. A second representative appeared. Commander Veyra, would you use house medical science to prolong Daniel's life without his request? No. Would you alter his employment to keep him near you? No. Would you order fleet personnel to protect him if he refused escort? No. Would you surrender him if the council threatened your house? No. You answered that last one faster. Because his freedom to leave belongs to him. The council's desire to take him does not. The house symbols brightened one after another. It was becoming obvious this was not a marriage review. It was a test of whether either of us understood the difference between protection and possession. Morvain understood that too, which was why he changed tactics. Commander Veyra, he said, your shelter invocation requires proof of immediate custody risk. Mr. Reeves is currently unharmed. Seraphine looked at him. His death prediction exists. Prediction is not custody. His Meridian file was accessed by your office. Administrative access. His assignment was approved after that access. Coincidence. His death projection was created before the system's failure. Scenario planning. And your office requested private transfer after I entered those facts publicly. Standard review. Seraphine took one step toward the central table. The chamber lights shifted. Her crimson eyes brightened, not with uncontrolled rage, but with something colder and far more unsettling. Command. Then release the original environmental failure telemetry. Morvain said nothing. Release the raw data from my ship. Military telemetry remains classified. I owned the ship before the council commissioned it. Operational data belongs to Joint Command, not engineering baseline data. The historian looked at his terminal. She is correct. Morvain ignored him. Request denied. Seraphine lifted her hand. The Veyra symbol appeared over the station network. Then I invoke owner audit. Every display changed. Morvain stared at the system. You cannot access suspended fleet telemetry. I am not accessing command telemetry. Seraphine's voice remained calm. I am accessing maintenance records belonging to House Veyra. I understood before the others did. The oxygen recycler. Yes. Streams of technical data appeared across the wall. Pressure readings. Valve states. Service histories. Diagnostic packets. The sort of information no politician would care about until one line turned red. I stepped closer. Stop there. Seraphine froze the display. I read the sequence twice. The recycler did not fail. Morvain's expression remained blank. The historian looked confused. Mr. Reeves? The emergency controller received a remote shutdown instruction. Seraphine looked at me. From where? I traced the maintenance routing path. The source identifier appeared at the bottom. Galactic Office of Treaty Stability. The same office that had accessed my Meridian file. The same office Morvain directed. No one spoke. The 7 house symbols shifted from observation status to formal challenge. Morvain finally lost the careful calm he had worn since the first hearing. That data is incomplete. Seraphine faced him, then released the complete data. It requires security review. You just called mine incomplete. Because maintenance systems cannot establish intent. Then establish yours. Silence. I looked at Seraphine and finally understood what everyone else had seen when she entered a room. Her power was not crimson eyes, vampire strength, noble blood, or 9 warships. It was that she understood exactly how much authority she possessed, and, more importantly, exactly where its legal edge ended. She never needed to cross that edge if she could force everyone else to explain why they were crossing theirs. Alara spoke from the house channel. Nocturne shelter invocation accepted provisionally. House Veyra recognizes immediate custody risk until independent audit concludes. 6 other house representatives added their seals. Morvain stared at the display. You are allowing 1 commander and 1 human technician to undermine council authority based on a maintenance log. I looked at him. You chose a maintenance technician. That was your mistake. Seraphine's eyes remained on the arbiter. No, their mistake was assuming a mortal life counted less because it ended sooner. The fleet outside Halcyon brightened fully in House Veyra crimson. Council military command remained suspended, but every ship opened civilian shelter channels under ancestral law. My terminal suddenly displayed hundreds of voluntary crew declarations. Engineers, medics, navigation specialists, civilian evacuees, Varian officers, Terran contractors. They were not pledging themselves to Seraphine. They were accepting neutral shelter status while the investigation continued. Seraphine had not ordered one of them. They are choosing, I said. Yes. Something softened in her expression. That matters. Morvain turned toward the exit. The station door refused to open. He looked back. Alara said, Private house review remains active. Release the chamber. When the review concludes, you are detaining a high arbiter. No, you entered voluntarily. I looked at Seraphine. Your family has a sense of humor. Unfortunately. Then the legal historian received another alert. His face went pale for what felt like the 10th time since I met him. Commander Veyra. What now? The owner audit found a second remote instruction embedded in the environmental network. I stepped toward the display. Another shutdown? No, he enlarged the file. It was scheduled, not executed. A future command. Activation time, 6 hours from now. Target. The main life support transfer hub connecting Halcyon to the 9th Night Fleet Shelter docks. I read the destination twice. If that hub goes offline, the station automatically evacuates civilians away from the Veyra docks. Seraphine nodded, and toward council-controlled sectors. The historian looked toward Morvain. The command was entered 3 months ago. I looked at Seraphine. Before I boarded your ship. Before your assignment became public. The entire room understood at once. The trap had never depended on one accident. If the first plan failed, a second had already been waiting. Morvain's expression gave us nothing. Seraphine turned toward me. Daniel, can you stop the command? Maybe, but not from here. The transfer hub has isolated maintenance control. Distance. The historian checked. 1.8 miles through the station's spine. Seraphine looked toward the house channel. Request civilian passage. Alara answered immediately. Granted. Morvain stepped forward. The council prohibits movement while nullification review remains active. 7 Nocturne House seals appeared across his order, challenging it simultaneously. Seraphine looked at me. Do you choose to go? There it was again. Not an order. Not even now. I looked at the countdown. 5 hours, 58 minutes. Yes. Then I am coming with you. Because I need protection? Because it is my fleet. Fair. The chamber door opened. Beyond it, hundreds of station personnel had gathered beneath white and crimson lights, watching the woman the council had tried to strip of command. Seraphine walked into the corridor without a military insignia, without council authority, and without issuing a single order. Still, people moved aside for her. Not from fear. From recognition. I followed beside her and finally understood the difference. The Galactic Council had spent 4 days trying to prove Seraphine was dangerous because she held too much power over me. What frightened them now was the opposite. She had revealed how powerful she became when she refused to own anyone at all. The fastest route to the life support transfer hub cross station Halcyon through maintenance corridors no diplomat would ever notice, which was probably why I trusted them more than the council chambers. Seraphine walked beside me under alternating white and crimson emergency lights, while station personnel cleared access ahead through civilian shelter authority. No one saluted her. No one needed to. She had surrendered her command insignia, yet every engineer, medic, and dock worker we passed seemed to know exactly who she was. Some nodded. Others simply moved aside. Seraphine acknowledged each of them with the same restrained seriousness she had once used with officers aboard the Ninth Night Fleet. The difference was that none of them were required to obey. "You are staring," she said. "Observing." Humans use that word when they are staring. I am adjusting to a vampire commander with no command who somehow still causes traffic patterns. People recognize competence. That sounded dangerously close to pride. Do not become comfortable. Too late. The station spine narrowed ahead into an engineering transit tube barely wide enough for two people to walk side by side. Transparent panels along one wall revealed Halcyon's interior structure, miles of conduits, docking supports, and distant ships suspended against the stars. The Ninth Night Fleet glowed beyond them in House Veyra crimson instead of Council white. I should have been focused on the 6-hour shutdown command waiting inside the transfer hub. Instead, I noticed that Seraphine had slowed her pace. Something wrong. No, that was fast. "Daniel, you look like you were listening to something." She stopped. "I am." I heard only ventilation fans and the distant vibration of station machinery. "What?" "Your heartbeat." I stared at her. "That is not unsettling at all. It is elevated. We are walking toward a sabotage command that could reroute thousands of civilians into council-controlled sectors." It was elevated before we entered this corridor. Maybe I dislike narrow spaces. Her crimson eyes studied me. "You repaired orbital platforms for 12 years. Fine. Maybe I dislike being monitored by someone who can hear my circulatory system. You agreed to mutual shelter." I did not see biometric surveillance in the fine print. There was no fine print. There is always fine print. She almost smiled, but the expression disappeared when I rolled my left shoulder. "You are in pain. Old maintenance injury. You did that aboard my ship. I did it crawling through an access duct aboard your ship. During a failure someone engineered. Still counts as an access duct." She stepped closer. "How bad?" "Manageable." That is not a measurement. 4 out of 10. You are lying. 3.5. That is not how lying works. I kept walking. Seraphine matched me for 6 steps before grabbing nothing, ordering nothing, and somehow making me stop by simply standing in front of the next maintenance door. "What?" I asked. "We have 5 hours and 42 minutes. "Yes." "The hub is 1.3 miles from here." "Also yes." "Then we have time for you to stop pretending your body is optional." I have been managing my body for 36 years. Poorly, based on available evidence. That sounds like a council report. Her expression hardened. "Do not compare me to them." The words came sharper than either of us expected. Silence filled the transit tube. Seraphine looked away first. "That was unfair," I said. "Yes." "I was joking." "I know." "Then why did it bother you?" She stared through the transparent wall at her fleet. "Because they keep calling concern control. I am beginning to wonder whether I know the difference. That stopped me more effectively than any command could have." "Seraphine, I spent 2 centuries giving orders because people expected certainty from me. I decided where ships moved, who evacuated first, which risks were acceptable. Then I met one human technician, and every law around us began asking whether I had too much power over him." "You do have too much power over most people." "Exactly. That does not mean you are using it against me." "How would you know?" "Because I keep saying no to you." She looked at me. "Frequently. And I am still standing here." "That is a low standard." "It is a useful one." I leaned against the wall. "You told me not to reaffirm the covenant while angry. You told me I could go home. You refused to take my work, my money, my choices, or even my bad decisions. You continue making those." "I am consistent." "Daniel." Her voice softened. "If I hear your heartbeat increase because you are frightened, and I change my decision because of it, is that protection or manipulation?" "Depends." "On what?" "Whether you ask me." She looked confused. "Ask what?" "Ask why my heartbeat changed instead of deciding you know." Seraphine stared at me for several seconds. Why did your heartbeat change? Because you were standing too close. Her eyes widened slightly. I regretted the answer immediately. That sounded different outside my head. Different how? More technical. I do not think there is a technical version. There usually is. Then provide one. I looked toward the maintenance door because machinery had never judged me for being awkward. You are a 214-year-old vampire commander who has spent 4 days dismantling galactic procedure because someone tried to use me as disposable infrastructure. You are also physically intimidating, emotionally difficult to read, and occasionally funny against your will. Occasionally. Do not interrupt the analysis. Something warm entered her expression. Continue. We have known each other 4 days. I do not know whether what I am feeling is trust, adrenaline, exhaustion, gratitude, attraction, or a neurological response to repeated legal hearings. Humans are very romantic. I warned you this would be technical. So your heartbeat increased because you may be attracted to me. I closed my eyes briefly. When you say it like that, I miss the Galactic Council. Seraphine laughed. Not the tiny almost laugh I had heard before. An actual laugh, low and brief and startlingly human. I opened my eyes. That was unnecessary. It was involuntary. Good. The ancient covenant probably has a statute for that. Do not tempt the historian. The tension eased, but not completely. Something remained between us now because we had named part of it without pretending it meant more than it did. Seraphine stepped back exactly 1 pace. Is this distance preferable? You do not have to calculate it. I calculate everything. That may be the problem. Then tell me if I am too close. I will. And if I am not, I will probably make another bad joke. Then I will know. She looked toward my shoulder. May I examine it? I nodded. Yes. Her hands were cooler than mine through the fabric of my work shirt. She touched the joint lightly, testing the area without forcing movement. Her expression became focused, professional, but I was aware of the distance between us in a way that made every engineering instinct in my brain temporarily useless. Lift your arm. I did. Pain stopped me halfway. Again, slower. You are enjoying the return of command tone. I asked permission. True. Does the pain travel down the arm? No numbness. No weakness. Only when arguing with ancient vampire law. That condition appears chronic. She removed her hand. The joint is strained. You should not be crawling through another access duct. Unfortunately, the transfer hub control is behind another access duct. I will go. Can you read Terran environmental routing architecture? No, then congratulations. You are supervisory support. I dislike that title. You surrendered, Commander. I am reconsidering. We continued through the station until the main transit corridor ended at a civilian shelter checkpoint. A dozen people waited there, including Terran engineers, Varian medics, and Halcyon maintenance staff. None carried weapons. An older human engineer stepped forward. Daniel Reeves. Yes. Martha Chun, Halcyon life support operations. We pulled the transfer hub schematics. She handed me a tablet. The scheduled command is buried inside a legacy control relay. We can isolate the network remotely, but if we do that, the hub goes into automatic evacuation mode, which sends civilians toward council sectors. Exactly. Seraphine looked toward the schematic. Can the command be removed manually? Martha nodded. Someone has to enter the isolated maintenance bay and disconnect the physical relay before the countdown reaches 0. Environmental conditions? I asked. Stable now. But the bay is narrow, and once the relay cover is opened, local gravity drops to 30%. That is unpleasant. Also, the access ladder is 20 feet. Seraphine looked at my shoulder. No, I looked at her. You are practicing. I am expressing an opinion. Strongly. Correct. Martha glanced between us. I assume this is the Vampire War Companion situation. Please do not call it that, Seraphine and I said at the same time. Martha blinked. Understood. I studied the schematic. There is a second way. I enlarged a maintenance route. The coolant service shaft connects to the relay bay from the opposite side. Martha frowned. That shaft has been sealed for 60 years. Physically sealed or administratively sealed? Physically. Why? Old pressure imbalance. Current pressure? She checked. Equalized after Halcyon retrofit. Then we reopen it. Seraphine leaned toward the tablet. What does that change? No ladder. No low-gravity climb. We walk in from the service level. Risk? We do not know the condition of the shaft. So your safer plan is an unknown 60-year-old tunnel. Engineers prefer surprises with doors. That sentence explains too much about you. Martha smiled despite herself. We can send a diagnostic drone first. Do that. We entered a small service room while the drone traveled through the old shaft. For the first time since leaving the council chamber, Seraphine and I were alone again. The door remained open to the engineering team outside, but the room itself was quiet. A single circular window looked toward the fleet. Daniel, she said. Yes. What happens after we stop this command? Ideally, someone gives me lunch. I am serious. So am I. After the investigation. After the 30 days. I looked at her. You are asking whether I intend to dissolve the bond. I am asking what you want. I do not know yet. She nodded once. No disappointment. No pressure. That made the answer harder, not easier. What do you want? I asked. Seraphine stared toward the ships. 4 days ago, I wanted my fleet restored, the council inquiry ended, and you returned safely to Earth. And now, I still want you safe. That is not the whole answer. No, her hands folded behind her back, the old commander posture returning whenever emotions became inconvenient. I want to know what you look like when you are not exhausted. I want to hear whether every human state has organizations as terrifying as your homeowners' associations. I want to understand why you drink coffee that smells burned, and then complain when variant tea is bitter. I want to know whether you always argue with machines aloud. They respond better. They do not respond at all. That is why the conversations are productive. She looked at me. I want more conversations. The simplicity of it hit harder than any dramatic declaration could have. That sounds manageable. You are avoiding the emotional content. Absolutely. Coward. Mortal. Those are not synonyms. Today they are. The maintenance terminal chimed. Drone inspection complete. Shaft structurally stable. I picked up the toolkit. Seraphine reached for it, then stopped. May I? My shoulder appreciates your growth. She took the heavier case. I carried the diagnostic tablet. We stepped back into the corridor together. Halfway to the service shaft, station lighting flickered once. Martha's voice came over the civilian channel. Daniel, the countdown changed. How much? Someone accelerated the scheduled command. I looked at the timer. 5 hours had become 23 minutes. Seraphine's crimson eyes turned cold. More vain. Maybe. You still defend uncertainty. Until evidence catches up. Annoying. Useful. We reached the sealed shaft door. Martha entered the override code. Nothing happened. The lock remained red. Remote permission denied, she said. Council authority? No. She stared at the display. The denial came from inside the transfer hub. I looked at Seraphine. Someone is already there. Her posture changed instantly. Not into a threat. Into readiness. Do you still choose to enter? She asked. I looked at the timer. 22 minutes. Yes. Then I enter with you. You may have to follow my instructions. Operational suggestions. You are learning. The old shaft opened with a deep mechanical groan. Darkness stretched ahead beneath thin emergency lights. Seraphine stood beside me, close enough that I could hear her coat shift when she breathed. My heartbeat increased again. She glanced at me. Fear. Partly. The other part. Do not become insufferable. Her crimson eyes warmed. Too late. Then the transfer hub alarm began counting down, and together we stepped into the passage toward whoever had been waiting for us. The person waiting inside the transfer hub was not a soldier. That made the situation worse. Seraphine and I reached the final maintenance hatch with 19 minutes left on the accelerated shutdown timer, and when the door opened, we found a man in a gray engineering uniform standing beside the primary relay console with both hands visible. He was human, maybe 50, with thinning blonde hair, tired eyes, and the expression of someone who had been expecting us. Daniel Reeves, he said. You took longer than the models predicted. I stopped. Seraphine moved 1/2 step closer to me without blocking my path. Who are you? I asked. Dr. Marcus Hale. Systems Analyst, Galactic Office of Treaty Stability. That office keeps appearing in my week. Because you were assigned to it before you knew you were assigned. Seraphine's crimson eyes narrowed. You altered the countdown. Hale looked toward the relay. I advanced the execution window. Why? Because the original plan is no longer viable. I glanced at the timer. 18 minutes, 42 seconds. You understand there are civilians connected to this hub. The shutdown does not harm them. It reroutes them into council custody. Correct. That is not harmless. Hill's expression barely changed. You think like a maintenance technician. Systems fail. People move. Authority follows. That sentence explains a lot. Seraphine studied the room. Where are the security officers? There are none. Why? Because if council troops confronted you inside a house shelter dispute, every Nocturne delegate would classify it as jurisdictional aggression. Hill looked at me. But an engineering correction performed by a civilian analyst remains administrative. You designed this carefully. For years. The answer made even Seraphine go still. Years? I asked. Hill nodded. Redirection doctrine began after the Kalis evacuations proved that house fleets could preserve independent civilian loyalty during council emergencies. Seraphine Veyra became a problem long before you boarded her ship. Then why me? Because she needed a human cost. Seraphine's face became unreadable. Hale continued. The council could not simply seize the Ninth Night Fleet. House Veyra ownership protected the hulls. The founding treaty protected her command lineage. But a diplomatic failure involving a Terran civilian would create the public pressure necessary for emergency oversight. So you searched for someone likely to stay inside a failing system. Yes. You accessed my Meridian file. Yes. You read Emily's medical record. I read the behavioral analysis connected to it. That is not better. No, for the first time. Hale sounded almost regretful. But it made you ideal. Seraphine's voice dropped. Do not call him ideal. Hale looked at her. Commander, that response is precisely why the project worked. You expected me to care. Not personally. Then you failed. Hale's attention moved between us. Did we? He touched the console. A legal archive opened above the relay, not an engineering screen. The familiar dark red symbol of our mutual war shelter appeared, but now a third ring circled it. Seraphine's expression changed instantly. Where did you get that? From House Veyra Registry. Those records are sealed. Not from the Galactic Council. Daniel, she said quietly, do not touch anything. What is the third ring? Hale smiled without warmth. The consequence neither the historian nor your commander explained before you reaffirmed the covenant. I looked at Seraphine. You knew? Not this. She stepped closer to the display. That symbol belongs to the old succession shelter code. Hale nodded. Exactly. That law has not applied for centuries. It applies whenever a recognized war companion remains bonded to a senior house heir during active council challenge. I stared at Seraphine. Senior house heir. I told you I was military heir. You did not tell me that came with another layer of accidental government. I did not know this layer had activated. That sentence is becoming a theme. Hale opened the registry details. The moment Commander Veyra invoked Nocturne Shelter while your mutual war shelter was active, House Law changed your standing. From what to what? From recognized war companion to continuity companion. That sounds bureaucratic. Seraphine looked pale even for a vampire. It is not. Hale's eye stayed on me. If Seraphine loses command, clan standing, or legal capacity while the council dispute remains active, you become a protected continuity witness to House Veyra succession. We already discussed witness standing. Not this kind. A new list appeared. You would have legal access to succession evidence, civilian shelter records, fleet ownership transfers, and any order claiming emergency control over House Veyra assets. That sounds politically useful. It is why the council wants the bond dissolved. There is more. Much more. Seraphine's voice hardened. Enough. Hale ignored her. The continuity provision was originally designed for battlefield spouses, adopted heirs, and protected foreign companions who might be the only independent witnesses left when a house commander died or disappeared. I looked at Seraphine. Battlefield spouses. Daniel. I heard him. Hale continued. Modern law separates witness status from marriage, but house custom did not evolve as cleanly. If a continuity companion survives 30 days of active challenge and voluntarily renews the bond, that companion becomes eligible for covenant courtship. I closed my eyes briefly. There it is. Not marriage, Seraphine said immediately. I know. Not engagement. I know. Not claim. I know. Hill looked almost amused. Technically, she is correct. You are enjoying this too much. I have spent 8 years studying these laws. This is the first live activation in my career. Congratulations. Daniel, Seraphine said. Listen to me. Eligibility means only that neither house nor council may reject a future union solely because you are human, mortal, foreign, or civilian. So it removes the barriers. Only if both of us independently ask for more. And if neither of us does, nothing happens. Hale raised one finger. Except the political consequences. Of course. He expanded the Thoid ring. Continuity companions receive temporary succession immunity. The Council cannot isolate Daniel from House evidence. House Veyra cannot remove him from hearings. Terran authorities cannot transfer him during the active challenge without his consent. That sounds useful, I said. It also makes him one of the most strategically valuable civilians in the system, Seraphine replied. Hale nodded. Every government concerned with Nocturne autonomy now has a reason to influence him. I looked at the timer. 16 minutes. And this transfer hub shutdown helps how? Hale touched another control. The answer appeared across the station map. Once the hub rerouted civilians into Council sectors, the Council could declare Nocturne Shelter operationally unstable. That declaration would trigger emergency succession review. If Seraphine refused Council restoration, House Veyra would be forced to choose an interim authority. As continuity companion, I would automatically receive standing in that review. You want me there, I said. Originally, yes. Seraphine's eyes narrowed. Why? Hale finally looked uncomfortable. Because Daniel was supposed to arrive traumatized, isolated, grateful to the Council for rescue, and angry at you for the system's failure. I understood. You expected me to testify against her. You were meant to become the human proof that independent vampire command was dangerous. Seraphine said nothing. Hale continued. Then she went back for you. Then she gave you water. Then the Covenant activated. Everything after that became increasingly difficult. You sound inconvenienced. You were supposed to be predictable. I am. Not in the way we required. I looked toward the console. Can you stop the shutdown? Yes. Will you? No, Seraphine's posture changed. Not aggressive. Absolute. Then move away from the console. Hale looked at her. You cannot command me here. Correct. She turned toward me. Daniel, do you want access to the relay? That distinction hit me immediately. Yes. Then I am requesting civilian maintenance priority for him. Hale laughed softly. You have learned the Covenant quickly. I learn quickly when people misuse power around me. You think this is about power. It is always about choice. He looked toward me. You should know the final consequence before making one. I sighed. There is another final consequence. There are several. Naturally. Hale opened a sealed variant clause. Seraphine's eyes widened. That is blood law. Relax, Hale said. No blood is required. I looked between them. Excellent opening. Hale pointed toward the text. Old Varian law treats voluntary shared shelter during active mortal threat as equivalent to a blood debt without requiring actual blood exchange. Meaning? Seraphine answered. If I knowingly protect you from a threat created because of my house, I owe shelter until you are independently safe. That sounds like what you are already doing. Yes. And me? If you knowingly act to preserve my civilian dependence while under that shelter, you may acquire reciprocal debt. I stared at the relay around us. The civilians connected to your fleet docks. Yes. Hale nodded. If Daniel disables this command, he protects thousands of House Veyra dependents from forced transfer. That creates reciprocal blood debt. Legally, yes. What does reciprocal debt do? Seraphine closed her eyes. It prevents either House Veyra or the Council from treating the bond as one-sided charity. That sounds good. It also gives Daniel equal standing to refuse any sacrifice made in his name. I frowned. Explain. If I offer command, title, property, or political surrender specifically to protect you, you can reject the exchange. I already reject those things. Under reciprocal debt, your refusal becomes legally binding on House Veyra. I looked at her. So you cannot destroy your entire life and call it protecting me if I say no. Correct. I love ancient vampires again. You will stop saying that when you meet more of them. Hale studied me. But the reverse also applies. You cannot throw away your own future and call it repayment to Seraphine if she refuses the sacrifice. I became quiet. Seraphine looked at me. She understood why that part mattered. Meridian Platform 4 had taught me to stay. The Council had chosen me because I stayed. Now an 1100-year-old law was telling me that staying did not automatically make every sacrifice noble. That is uncomfortable, I said. Good, Seraphine replied. You approve? Deeply. I thought you liked my poor self-preservation. I tolerate it. Warm. Daniel. Her voice softened. This law would mean neither of us gets to convert guilt into obligation. That was the real consequence. Not marriage. Not titles. Not some mystical ownership hidden in ancient words. The bond was becoming dangerous because it kept removing the tools powerful people used to make sacrifice look voluntary. Hale watched both of us realize it. Now you understand why the council buried these statutes under ceremonial language. Warbride, I said. Exactly. Call it marriage law, and everyone argues about romance. Call it reciprocal civilian protection, and governments become nervous. And if we stop the relay, reciprocal debt activates automatically? Only if both parties acknowledge the act afterward. Seraphine looked at me. We do not have to. Why would we not? Because every additional layer makes you harder to remove from house politics, and makes you harder to punish for protecting me. Yes. Then we decide afterward. She nodded. Afterward. The timer hit 13 minutes. Good. Now can we return to the part where the station needs maintenance? Hale stepped between me and the relay access door. You are still assuming stopping the command solves the problem. Does it not? No. The shutdown is only one trigger. What is the second? Your war companion registry. Seraphine's face went cold. Hale continued. The council has already filed emergency succession review based on your voluntary reaffirmation. The hub failure would make the case stronger, but it is no longer necessary. Then why are you here? I asked. To offer you an exit. I have heard several. This one is different. He opened a Terran legal form. Daniel Reeves voluntarily dissolves mutual shelter and declines continuity status. In exchange, the council seals Emily Reeves's medical records permanently, restores your civil infrastructure credentials, and guarantees independent Terran transport to Earth. Seraphine did not speak. She did not even look at me. That mattered more than anything she could have said. Hale continued. No detention. No treaty stability custody. No political role. You go home. My chest tightened. Emily's safe. My career restored. Earth. An actual sunrise. A bed that did not hum with artificial gravity. 4 days ago, I would have signed before he finished the sentence. And Seraphine? House review proceeds without you. What happens to her? Likely command removal. Possibly temporary clan suspension. Nothing permanent if she cooperates. If she cooperates with what? Council restructuring of the 9th Night Fleet. Meaning they get the fleet anyway. They gain oversight. The same oversight this entire operation was designed to create. Hill looked tired. Daniel, systems do not become moral because you dislike the people operating them. True. Then take the safe outcome. For whom? For you. I looked at Seraphine. She still refused to influence me. That made the choice mine in the most inconvenient possible way. If I sign, does the relay command stop? Hale hesitated. Yes. Immediately. Yes. So you tied civilian safety to my signature. I offered a negotiated resolution. You put thousands of people behind a countdown and called my agreement voluntary. Hill's expression tightened. No one will be harmed. That is not the standard. I stepped closer to the console. Seraphine, do you want me to sign? She finally looked at me. No, Hale smiled slightly. Seraphine continued before he could speak. But if you want to sign, I will help you leave safely. Hill's smile disappeared. Why? I asked. Her answer came without hesitation. Because wanting you near me does not give me the right to make staying expensive. The words settled between us. There it was again, something warmer than trust, but still too new to name. I looked at the form. Then my answer is no. Hale exhaled. Because of her? No. Because you made civilians part of the price. I pointed toward the relay. Open the access door. I cannot permit that. Martha Chun has civilian maintenance authority. Council emergency override supersedes her access. Seraphine looked toward the ceiling. House shelter infrastructure priority supersedes council emergency override when civilian transfer is involuntary. Hale stared at her. You memorized that? While Daniel was discussing Ohio. I am inspirational. The console flashed. Martha's authorization appeared remotely. The access door unlocked. Hale stepped aside at last. You still have 10 minutes. That is plenty of time if someone stops talking. Daniel, Seraphine said. Your shoulder. Operational suggestion noted. That was concern. Also noted. We entered the relay chamber together. The physical disconnect sat behind a service panel at floor level, exactly where the old schematic predicted. I knelt, opened my toolkit, and started tracing the unauthorized control line. Seraphine held the diagnostic light above my shoulder. Blue wire, she asked. There are no wires. Fiber bundles. The blue bundle. Do not touch anything. That sounded like a command. Engineering privilege. Convenient. Extremely. 8 minutes. I found the remote command coupler hidden behind a legitimate council service module. There. Seraphine leaned closer. Can you remove it? Yes. Risk. Automatic reroute if I break the wrong connection. Confidence. 80%. That is unacceptable. For engineers, that is practically romance. She gave me a look. Poor word choice. Given our week, probably. 6 minutes. I isolated the relay, verified pressure controls, then disconnected the hidden command coupler. The countdown stopped at 5 minutes and 14 seconds. Every station map changed. Civilian transfer hub normal. No automatic evacuation required. I sat back against the wall. Done. Seraphine looked at the confirmation, then at me. You protected my people. I repaired a relay. Daniel. Fine. Both. The ancient covenant symbol appeared automatically on her wrist terminal. Reciprocal Shelter Act may be acknowledged. Accept or decline. She looked at me. This is the blood debt equivalent. Without blood. Yes. No ownership. No marriage. No obligation to remain after 30 days. Correct. But neither of us can sacrifice the other person's future without consent. Correct. I held out my hand toward the terminal. Accept. Seraphine did not move. Are you sure? You came back for me. I just stopped thousands of your civilians from being used as leverage. If the law's response is that neither of us gets to become a martyr without permission, I can live with that. Her crimson eyes softened. That may be the most romantic thing you have said. I was aiming for legal. You failed. She pressed accept. The terminal shifted from dark red to silver crimson. Reciprocal shelter recognized. Continuity companion status confirmed. Sacrificial exchange requires dual consent. Then one final line appeared. House Veyra succession challenge activated. War companion must be present at formal air review. I stared at it. We fixed the station and somehow created another hearing. Yes. How soon? Seraphine checked the notice. Her expression darkened. 1 hour. Where? The Nocturne Assembly Hall aboard my flagship. I looked through the relay window toward the 9th Night Fleet. The flagship currently under council suspension. House Shelter Authority permits entry. Who attends? 7 Nocturne houses. House Veyra elders. Council observers. More vain. Almost certainly. And what are they deciding? She looked at the status line. Whether I remain senior heir. Because you protected me. Because I defied council transfer while bound to a mortal continuity companion. And if they remove you? Another Veyra heir takes control of house assets. Including the fleet shelters. Yes. Which could expose the civilians again. Yes. I stood slowly, shoulder protesting. Then we should go. Seraphine studied me. Daniel, this next hearing is not about maintenance. Everything is maintenance if the system is old enough. They will question whether my attachment to you compromises house judgment. Attachment. Do not make me repeat it. I was enjoying the progress. She stepped closer, stopping at exactly the distance we had discussed in the transit tube. They will ask whether I would choose you over command. Would you? That is the wrong question. Why? Her eyes held mine. Because I am beginning to think the choice is not between you and command. It is between the kind of commander I was and the kind of person I am willing to become. The relay door opened behind us. Outside, House Veyra escorts waited under crimson shelter. Lights, not military insignia. Seraphine offered me her hand, palm open. Do you choose to enter the succession hearing with me? I looked at her hand, then at the fleet beyond the station glass. Yes. I took it. The Covenant terminal recorded nothing this time. No ancient law activated. No political status changed. For once, the choice belonged only to us. Then Seraphine looked toward the waiting ships and said quietly, Good. Because when the 7 houses see your continuity status, they are going to assume we are halfway to marriage. I stopped walking. We are what? Legally, they are wrong. That was not reassuring. I know. How wrong? She gave me the smallest smile. That depends on whether either of us survives the family questions. The Nocturne Assembly Hall aboard Seraphine's flagship had been designed for people who believed architecture should remind visitors that history was older than fear. The chambers stretched nearly 200 feet beneath a vaulted ceiling of black alloy and red glass, with 7 raised platforms arranged in a circle around a central floor. Each platform carried the crest of a Nocturne house. House Veyra occupied the northern position beneath a crimson star. Seraphine and I entered through the civilian shelter gate, which meant no one saluted her and no one stopped me. That alone caused more whispers than our linked covenant status. "They are staring," I said. "Yes." "At you or me?" "Both." "Good. I prefer shared responsibility. You are about to meet 7 families who have spent centuries arguing over whether responsibility should ever be shared. Then I feel culturally prepared." Seraphine's hand remained near mine, but did not touch it. She had offered it on the way from the transfer hub, and I had taken it. Here, under the eyes of every house elder, she let the choice reset. I noticed. That probably explained why I stepped closer voluntarily. The first elder to rise was Matriarch Veyra. She stood beneath the House Veyra crest wearing the same charcoal robe she had worn during remote review. In person, she was more intimidating. Not because she was physically imposing, because everyone around her seemed to adjust their behavior before she spoke. "Daniel Reeves," she said, "welcome aboard a ship that nearly killed you. I appreciate the honesty. You may appreciate less before the hour ends. That also feels honest." Seraphine looked toward me. "You are speaking to my matriarch." She started it. Alera's mouth almost curved. Across the circle, Lord Cashin leaned forward. "This proceeding concerns succession, not entertainment." "Then perhaps the Nocturne houses should stop creating material," I said. Seraphine closed her eyes briefly. Alera said, "He may continue." Cashin looked displeased. I decided I liked Alera more. High Arbiter Morvain sat at a lower council observer table with Dr. Marcus Hale beside him. That was more concerning. Hale had admitted his role in advancing the transfer hub countdown. Yet here he was under council witness protection instead of detention. I looked toward Seraphine. "Why is Hale here?" "Because the council classified him as cooperating technical staff. He sabotaged a civilian transfer system. He claims he was executing authorized contingency procedure. That phrase deserves retirement." Morvain heard me. "Mr. Reeves, the Assembly will determine whether Commander Veyra's continued leadership threatens House stability. Dr. Hale's status is outside your authority. Everything involving my supposed death prediction seems to end up outside my authority." Alera raised one hand. "Then we will begin there." The hall darkened. A star map appeared over the center. The Ninth Night Fleet floated above it, surrounded by council routes, house ownership markers, and shelter channels. "Seraphine Veyra," Alera said, "you are senior military heir of House Veyra. Under ordinary succession, removal from council command would trigger temporary house review. Your situation is not ordinary because a mortal continuity companion now holds reciprocal shelter standing." I looked toward Seraphine. "That would be me." "Unfortunately," she murmured. "I heard that." "Good." Alera continued. "The accusation before this assembly is that your judgment has become subordinate to personal attachment." Cashin spoke immediately. "The evidence is substantial." Seraphine surrendered command privileges after knowing the mortal had entered her shelter covenant. She invoked ancestral protection across 9 military vessels. She challenged Galactic Council jurisdiction. She restored House infrastructure outside Council command. She has now accepted reciprocal debt with a foreign civilian. "You forgot that she stopped a planned transfer of thousands of civilians," I said. Cashin looked at me. "You do not have speaking privilege unless addressed." A silver-crimson symbol appeared beneath my feet. Continuity witness may respond to claims involving his status. I looked at the floor. Apparently the ship disagrees. Seraphine did not smile, but her eyes did. Cashin continued. "Then answer. Do you deny that Commander Veyra's decisions changed after meeting you?" "No." The hall became quieter. "Do you deny that she surrendered rank rather than release you?" "No." "Do you deny that she has expressed personal concern for your survival?" "No." Cashin leaned back. "Then you confirm the charge." "No." His expression hardened. "Explain." "You asked whether her decisions changed. You did not ask whether they became worse." A murmur crossed the platforms. "Before meeting me," Seraphine obeyed council emergency classifications that marked civilian sectors expendable. After meeting me, she checked who was making those classifications. That is a change. I am not qualified to tell you whether it makes her a better vampire. I can tell you it makes her harder to manipulate. Morvain stood. There. The human admits influence. Everyone influences everyone, I said. You accessed my sister's medical file because you wanted to influence me before we ever met. The difference is Seraphine lets me know when she disagrees with me. You reduce a constitutional problem to interpersonal preference. You keep expanding an interpersonal problem until it becomes constitutional whenever that gives you more authority. Alara looked toward Morvain. Sit. He stared at her. Matriarch, the council has observer rights. Observe. He sat. I was beginning to understand why Seraphine could make entire rooms feel smaller without raising her voice. Alara turned to Seraphine. Do you love him? Silence hit the hall harder than any legal accusation had. I looked at Seraphine. She looked at Alara. That is not relevant. Under house law, emotional attachment is part of the review. We have known each other less than a week. That was not my question. Seraphine's jaw tightened. Then the answer is no. I expected relief. Instead, something oddly complicated moved through me. Seraphine glanced toward me immediately. Daniel, you do not need to explain. I know. Good. Are you offended? No, your heartbeat changed. Every vampire platform turned toward me. That feature of your species is becoming deeply inconvenient. Alara looked amused. Cashin did not. This is precisely the instability we are discussing. The mortal is emotionally invested. I looked at him. I am also emotionally invested in coffee. It does not get succession rights. Seraphine laughed under her breath. Cashin stared at her. You find this amusing? Seraphine's expression settled. I find it clarifying. Clarifying what? That you have spent 20 minutes treating emotion as corruption while ignoring concealed infrastructure sabotage. She stepped into the center of the hall. Daniel and I may become attached. We may not. We may dissolve the covenant in 30 days. None of those possibilities changed the maintenance records proving treaty stability inserted unauthorized control instructions into my ship and station Halcyon. Morvain rose again. Those records do not prove malicious intent. Then release the project authorization. Classified. Release the behavioral model used to select Daniel. Restricted. Release the chain of approval for accessing his Meridian file. Protected internal procedure. Seraphine looked around the 7 houses. This is the pressure being placed before you. Not whether I care about a human. Whether you are willing to let the council hide behind classification while demanding that House Veyra surrender a witness because my concern for him is visible. One of the other elders stood. Lady Naira Sol, younger than Alara, with white hair braided over one shoulder. Seraphine, House Sol, does not dispute the council's misconduct. We question your remedy. You converted warships into shelter vessels. You allowed a mortal civilian continuity access. You have created precedent. Yes, that precedent may allow future foreign governments to insert civilians into house succession. Only if a house heir voluntarily accepts mutual shelter. Influence can be subtle. Seraphine looked toward me, which is why the covenant prohibits command, financial dependence, compelled labor, restricted communication, and unilateral sacrifice. Naira nodded slowly. A strong answer. Cashin looked toward me. Then perhaps the mortal should prove independence. Dissolve the covenant now. The hall changed. Even Seraphine looked surprised. On what basis? Alara asked. Cashin spread his hands. If his standing is truly voluntary, he may dissolve. Seraphine remains free to pursue the investigation through house channels. Daniel returns to Terran authority. The political conflict ends. I looked toward Morvain. He was carefully expressionless. Which Terran authority? Cashin replied. Independent Terran diplomatic custody. Chosen by whom? The Galactic Council recognizes the transfer office. So we are back to council-approved custody. You would be among your own species. Marcus Hale is my species. Hale looked down. Species is not a trust credential. Naira watched me closely. What would satisfy you? Independent review outside treaty stability. Public chain of custody. My own counsel. No access to Emily's medical records. No transfer based on the pre-written death scenario. Cashin shook his head. You are making demands far beyond your rank. I have no rank. Exactly. Then stop giving me problems that apparently require one. Seraphine looked toward me. Daniel, you do not have to stay to win this argument. I know. You may dissolve if that is what you want. Cassian interrupted. And if he leaves, do you accept council restoration? Seraphine looked at him. No. Then this proves the issue is larger than Daniel. It always was. That answer unsettled the room. Cassian had expected her rebellion to collapse if I disappeared from the equation. Seraphine refused to give him that simplicity. I challenged the council because the evidence showed civilians and house assets were being manipulated, she said. Daniel exposed the pattern. He did not create it. If he leaves tomorrow, the pattern remains. I looked at her. That mattered. She was not making me the moral center of her life. She was letting what happened to me reveal something larger she could no longer ignore. Alara turned toward the house platforms. Then we proceed to social consequence. 7 displays illuminated. House Veyra had active contracts with 21 council worlds. Medical supply agreements. Gate access. Shipyard rights. Civilian evacuation corridors. Cassian pointed toward the list. If Seraphine remains senior heir while defying council nullification, these contracts may be suspended. May? I asked. Several governments have already issued warnings. Show them. Cassian hesitated. They are diplomatic communications. The Assembly is deciding whether to remove her because of those warnings. Show the cost. Alara nodded. Display them. The messages appeared. 3 governments threatened temporary gate restrictions. 2 warned of insurance suspension for Veyra-owned vessels. 1 indicated medical exports could face inspection delays. Another threatened to review residence permits for Veyra civilians living in council systems. Seraphine's face hardened at the last one. They are threatening civilians because of my legal challenge. Morvain replied. They are assessing security risk. A child living on an agricultural moon is not a security risk. Intergovernmental relationships have consequences. I knew that phrase. Different galaxy, same language. Who suffers first if the contracts suspend? I asked. Alara answered. Civilian shipping communities. Frontier hospitals. Mixed species settlements dependent on nocturne evacuation corridors. Not the elders. No, not Morvain. No, not me immediately. No, I looked toward the displays. Then the people making the threats are not paying the cost. Cassian leaned forward. And your solution? Make every threatened suspension public. Morvain objected instantly. Diplomatic communications are confidential. That is convenient. Confidentiality prevents escalation. Sometimes. It also prevents a farming colony from knowing why its medical shipment is delayed. Seraphine looked toward Alara. House Veyra can publish our side voluntarily. You would expose negotiations. I would expose consequences. Not private strategy. Naira leaned forward. Separate terms from effects. Exactly. Seraphine began listing them. If a gate closed, publish which civilian routes were affected. If inspection slowed medical supplies, publish expected delays. If insurers suspended coverage, publish the company and jurisdiction. If residence permits were reviewed, provide legal assistance to every civilian family regardless of loyalty to Seraphine. No retaliation, she added. No house restriction against worlds that cooperate with the Council. Civilians may choose alternative carriers and rival house routes without penalty. Cassian stared at her. You would permit House Veyra dependents to use house or shipping during a dispute. If house or can move medicine faster, yes. You would give a rival house leverage. I would give a patient medicine. The answer moved through the chamber. I watched faces change. Not everyone agreed. But the argument had shifted away from whether Seraphine was emotionally compromised and toward what leadership was for. Morvain saw it too. This is sentimental governance. Seraphine turned toward him. No. Sentimental governance hides cost to protect pride. I am proposing the opposite. Then Marcus Hale stood. That surprised everyone. High Arbiter, he said. I request permission to submit supplemental testimony. Morvain's eyes narrowed. You have already provided your technical statement. This concerns authorization. The hall quieted. Hale looked toward me, then Seraphine. The behavioral selection program that identified Daniel Reeves was not approved only by treaty stability. Morvain went still. Dr. Hale. The project had a house sponsor. Seraphine's face changed. Which house? Hale looked toward the 7 platforms. House or? Everyone turned toward Cassian. He did not move. My stomach dropped. You helped choose me? I asked. Cashin's expression became cold. Be precise. Hale activated a record, house, or provided historical nocturne legal analysis, including the probability that a protected human death aboard a Veyra vessel would justify emergency command review. Seraphine stared at Cashin. You gave Morvain the legal pathway. I gave the Council general constitutional consultation. You modeled my response. I modeled House Veyra's likely resistance to oversight, using civilian casualties, using hypothetical scenarios. Hale shook his head. Daniel's file was attached before final approval. Cashin looked toward him. You are violating classified agreement. Yes. Why? Hale looked tired. Because I advanced the transfer hub countdown and watched a maintenance technician refuse an easy exit because civilians were attached to the price. I have spent 8 years calling that kind of price an operational variable. He looked toward me. I am no longer comfortable with the language. Morvain rose. This testimony is compromised by emotional pressure. I laughed once. You really do have one argument. Ilara stood. The entire hall went silent. House, or will suspend voting privilege in this succession review, pending authentication of Dr. Hale's records. Cashin's face hardened. You cannot remove a founding house from assembly vote based on one technician's confession. I can suspend one vote during conflict review. Ilara, sit. He did not. If Veyra retains Seraphine, the Council will isolate all nocturne houses. You think this is about one mortal. It is about preserving our treaty. Seraphine faced him. Then why did preserving the treaty require predicting his death? Cashin had no answer that did not sound like the answer. Ilara looked toward the remaining houses. The succession question will continue with 6 voting houses. Before anyone could proceed, every Council communication display turned white. A new emergency notice appeared across the hall. Galactic Council Executive Review. House Veyra shelter status subject to immediate suspension. Morvain's expression relaxed for the first time in an hour. The full Council has acted. Seraphine looked at the notice. On what grounds? Intergovernmental instability. Meaning, 5-member governments have threatened withdrawal from nocturne transit agreements unless your mortal war companion status is terminated. I stared at him. Terminated by whom? By House Veyra or by you? And if I refuse? Morvain looked towards Seraphine. Then the Council will suspend all Veyra Gate access within 12 hours. The map changed. Dozens of civilian routes darkened. Hospitals, transport corridors, mixed settlements, families. Exactly the kind of leverage the Covenant had been designed to expose. Seraphine looked at me, and for the first time since the transfer hub, I saw genuine fear in her face. Not fear for command. Fear that protecting my right to choose had just become expensive for thousands of people who never agreed to the argument. Daniel, she said quietly, this changes things. I know. If you dissolve now, the gates stay open. According to Morvain, the Council notice is authenticated. I know. Then this is no longer only your sacrifice or mine. I know. Her voice became softer. I will not ask you to stay. I know. And I will not ask you to leave. I know. Cashin watched us from the suspended house platform. Morvain watched from below. 6 houses watched from the circle. 23,000 shelter personnel watched through the fleet network. Somewhere beyond all of them, billions of people would eventually reduce whatever happened next to a headline about a vampire commander and a mortal human. Seraphine did not reach for my hand. She left it beside her, open and empty. What do you choose? She asked. I looked at the map of threatened gates and finally understood the shape of the trap. The Council had failed to make me leave through fear, career, family, law, and custody. Now they had found the one pressure strong enough to reach me. Other people. They were betting that I would sacrifice myself rather than let strangers pay for my protection. They had studied Meridian correctly after all. The only question was whether I had learned enough since then to recognize when kindness was being turned into a weapon. I did not answer Seraphine immediately because the Council had finally built a trap around the one part of me they understood correctly. They knew I would not let strangers lose medicine, transit access, or safe passage because of a decision connected to me. They had read Meridian Platform 4. They had studied every report I filed afterward. They knew I had spent 12 years becoming the kind of man who would rather carry too much responsibility than risk leaving somebody else behind. So the obvious move was to dissolve the Covenant, let the gates stay open, and call the sacrifice mine. That was exactly why I did not do it. How many gates are actually threatened? I asked. Morvain looked almost disappointed. The council notice lists 34 Veyra access transit gates. That is not what I asked. He frowned. Clarify. How many of those 34 gates are necessary for civilian survival within the next 12 hours? Cashin spoke from the suspended house or platform. All transit infrastructure matters. That is a political answer. I turned toward Alara. Can the assembly show actual traffic schedules? She looked at the house archivist. Display civilian dependency data. A second map opened beside the council warning. The 34 threatened gates split into categories: medical routes, food shipments, passenger corridors, industrial freight, military logistics, ceremonial transit, emergency evacuation. I stepped closer. There. Seraphine watched me. What do you see? The council wants us to react to the number 34. Because it sounds catastrophic. Exactly. But 8 gates carry no scheduled civilian traffic in the next 48 hours. 6 are primarily military logistics. For our ceremonial house routes. Alara nodded slowly. That leaves 16 with civilian dependency. And not all 16 fail at the same time if council recognition is suspended. Morvain's expression hardened. Gate access requires authorization. Gate operation requires authorization. Local traffic buffers are separate. I looked toward the technical staff. Who manages route persistence? A variant systems coordinator raised one hand. Each gate maintains independent civilian reservations for 12 to 18 hours after central authorization loss, depending on system load. So if suspension begins 12 hours from now, some civilian reservations remain valid beyond that. Yes. Morvain interrupted. You are treating a diplomatic crisis as a scheduling problem. Right now it is a scheduling problem. I pointed toward the medical routes. Which hospitals have time-critical deliveries? Another display opened. 5 hospitals, 2 frontier clinics, 1 agricultural moon dependent on refrigerated blood substitute shipments for its variant population. Seraphine moved beside me. The blood substitute route cannot be delayed. How long until shipment? 9 hours. Gate suspension begins in 12. Then it clears before suspension if departure remains on schedule. I looked toward Alara. Can House Veyra guarantee departure? Yes. Then move it now. Morvain stood. The council may interpret accelerated transport as circumvention. Is it prohibited? Silence. High Arbiter. No, then it is scheduling. Alara issued no command herself. Instead, she opened a civilian channel. Medical carrier Evershade. Do you voluntarily accept immediate departure under existing authorization? A captain appeared on the display. Yes. Then depart when local control confirms clearance. The first red medical route changed to green. I pointed toward the second. Next, for the next 20 minutes, we stopped talking about galactic stability and started talking about cargo manifests. That was where Morvain lost control of the room. Governments were comfortable with abstractions. Engineers were not. One clinic needed replacement filtration membranes. Another required a shipment of pediatric medication that could survive a 3-day delay if cold storage remained stable. A mining colony needed oxygen catalyst cartridges, but 2 independent Terran suppliers carried compatible units through a neutral gate 27 light hours away. A civilian settlement depended on Veyra passenger access, but local housing capacity could support stranded travelers for 48 hours. None of that erased the council. Threat. It changed its shape. They are not closing 34 doors on people, I said. They are threatening to create enough inconvenience that everyone panics before anyone checks alternatives. Cashin leaned forward. You think inconvenience is trivial? No. I think inconvenience becomes leverage when nobody measures it. Seraphine looked toward the civilian logistics display. What do you need? Independent routes. From rival houses? From anyone willing. Cashin laughed once. House, or will not subsidize Veyra Defiance. I did not ask for a subsidy. Then what are you asking? Market rates. Public contracts. No loyalty condition. He stared at me. You want House, or to carry Veyra civilians while House Veyra is under council sanction. If you have capacity. Why would I? Because you argued 10 minutes ago that this dispute threatens Nocturne stability. Here is your chance to prove you care about stability more than Seraphine losing. The hall went silent. Cashin's expression tightened. Lady Nyra Soul spoke before he could answer. House Sol has civilian gate capacity along 3 of the affected routes. I looked toward her. At what cost? Standard emergency freight rates. Any political condition? No, Seraphine. She looked at Alara rather than me. House Veyra should accept if affected communities agree. Alara nodded. Correct. The communities were contacted one by one. That mattered. We did not move people because a house elder thought it was elegant. We asked clinic administrators, shipping coordinators, settlement councils, and local families what they actually needed. Some chose Veyra routes while they remained open. Others preferred House Sol. One Terran agricultural cooperative chose a human commercial carrier because it was slower but familiar. No one was forced into a symbolic act of loyalty. The threatened map became less dramatic with every decision. Morvain tried another angle. These are temporary workarounds. The Council can sustain gate suspension indefinitely. Can it? I asked. Yes. At what cost to member governments? That stopped him. Seraphine looked at me. Explain. I pointed toward the route network. These gates do not only carry Veyra traffic. The technical coordinator enlarged the data. 17 of the threatened gates also served Council commercial corridors. 7 carried Terran freight. 4 supported House Sol shipping. 3 fed neutral stations that paid transit fees directly into Council maintenance funds. If the Council suspends Veyra access completely, I said, does it isolate Veyra identifiers only, or does it reduce gate capacity for everyone during inspection? The coordinator checked. Under executive review, any gate handling disputed house credentials enters enhanced verification. Throughput drops by approximately 30%. Lady Naira leaned forward. For all traffic? Yes. Then House Sol loses capacity even if our access remains valid. Correct. One of the other house elders requested his own figures. Then another. Within minutes the council sanction stopped looking like pressure applied only to Seraphine. It looked like a tax on everybody using the same infrastructure. Morvain's voice hardened. Security has costs. Then publish them, I said. If member governments want 30% slower freight to pressure one house into ending a lawful covenant, let them explain that to their own exporters. You assume public pressure should determine security policy. No. I assume people paying the bill should know why the bill increased. Alara looked toward the public channel. Can the consequences be released without exposing protected security routing? The coordinator nodded. Aggregate capacity, delay estimates, medical effects, and civilian costs can be published safely. Do it. Morvain stood. The council objects. Noted, Alara said. House Veyra is publishing its own operational effects. The first public report went out. Then House Sol requested permission to attach its projected losses. A neutral shipping guild added fuel costs. A Terran carrier submitted expected delays. Suddenly the threat was no longer Seraphine Veyra versus the Galactic Council. It was a spreadsheet large enough to make 11 governments uncomfortable. I looked at Seraphine. This is going better than expected. Your standards are alarming. Nobody has threatened my sister in almost an hour. Do not tempt them. Dr. Hale had been silent since the assembly began shifting toward logistics. Now he stepped forward. Daniel, you understand this does not solve the underlying charge against Seraphine. I know. The council still believes her judgment is compromised. Then evaluate her decisions. They are already evaluating them. No, they are evaluating the fact that I exist. Hale looked toward Morvain, then back to me. And what would you evaluate? I answered immediately. Whether she hides costs. Whether she forces people to stay. Whether she uses house power to punish dissent. Whether she protects people who disagree with her. Whether she can change her mind when evidence changes. Seraphine's expression became very still. That is a demanding standard. You wanted command. I had command. Then maybe this is the maintenance schedule. A few house elders laughed. Seraphine looked offended. I am not infrastructure. You have more legacy systems than this station. Daniel, I withdraw the metaphor. You do not. No, Alara lifted one hand. The external witness has made a useful point. House review will examine decisions, not emotional existence. Cashin stood again. Emotion cannot be separated from decisions. Agreed, I said. Which is why you should disclose yours. He turned toward me. Mine. You helped build a predictive model around a civilian death because you wanted House Veyra brought under stronger council oversight. You clearly have feelings about Seraphine's independence. That is ideology, not emotion. That is a very expensive distinction. Alera's eyes narrowed toward Cashin. Sit. This time he did. The public cost report began producing responses almost immediately. One council world withdrew its gate suspension warning and requested technical review instead. A second clarified that it had never intended to block medical traffic. A third demanded Morvain explain whether the 30% throughput reduction had been disclosed before the executive vote. The threat was fracturing because it had depended on everyone imagining somebody else would bear the cost. Quietly, Seraphine looked toward me. You did not dissolve. No. You also did not demand everyone absorb the consequences of your choice. That seemed rude. You reorganized 12 interstellar routes in 20 minutes. I made phone calls. You made 9 billion vampires watch you argue about freight capacity. That part was accidental. Your accidents are politically exhausting. I looked at the remaining red routes. We still have one problem. A frontier hospital on the moon Vesta 9 needed a very incompatible plasma substitute shipment in 14 hours. Its normal route passed through a gate scheduled to enter council suspension in 12. Alternate routes added 18 hours. Can it leave now? I asked. Cargo is not ready, the coordinator said. Preparation requires 4 more hours. Then arrival falls inside suspension. Yes. Local reserve? 8 hours after scheduled arrival. Too tight. Seraphine looked toward the fleet manifest. The Ninth Night medical carrier has compatible stock. I turned to her. How much? Enough for several weeks. Can you transfer it? The fleet is under shelter status. Civilian humanitarian transfers are permitted. Do you need council approval? No, Morvain immediately objected. The carrier's supplies were acquired under joint fleet funding. Alera checked the records. Not this batch. House Veyra purchased it before commission. I looked at Seraphine. Then send it. She hesitated. The stock supports our own crews. How much reserve remains if you send Vesta 9 what it needs? 26 days. Resupply alternatives? House Soul can replace it within 9. Naira nodded. At cost. Then do not give it away, I said. Sell it to the hospital at the same price House Veyra paid. Buy replacement from House Soul. Publish both transactions. Seraphine looked at me. You are avoiding charity. I am avoiding turning the hospital into a political debtor. Her eyes softened. Good. The hospital accepted. House Soul accepted replacement terms. The last critical route turned green. For the first time since the council issued its ultimatum, no civilian life or medical dependency required me to dissolve the covenant. The sanctions could still hurt. Freight would become slower. Insurance would rise. Political relationships would become ugly. But nobody had a hospital, a child, or an oxygen shipment held behind my signature anymore. I looked toward Morvain. Now ask me again. His expression hardened. Ask you what? Whether I will dissolve to keep the gates open. The room became completely still. The offer remains, he said. Then no. Seraphine looked at me, but I kept my eyes on Morvain. Not because I think this bond is destiny. Not because I owe Seraphine anything. Not because I want a title or house status. I refuse because you created a crisis and attached innocent people to my compliance. Once we separated the civilian problem from the political demand, your offer became what it always was, which is leverage. Morvain's jaw tightened. You are gambling with galactic stability. No, I am refusing to let kindness become your control system. I pointed toward the now mostly green map. You studied Meridian and learned I would stay when people needed help. You were right. What you missed is that staying does not mean surrendering judgment. Helping people is not the same as obeying whoever places them in danger. Dr. Hale looked down. Cashin remained silent. Seraphine did not. That, she said quietly, is why they chose you. I glanced toward her. Because I am difficult? Because you are predictable. We covered this. No. They predicted the first half. Her crimson eyes held mine. They predicted that you would move toward people in danger. They did not predict that once you arrived, you would ask who built the danger, who paid for it, who benefited, and whether the sacrifice was actually necessary. Alera stood beneath the Veyra crest. House Assembly requests the human witness's proposed condition for continued cooperation with Galactic Review. I blinked. My condition? You have just prevented the Council ultimatum from functioning as immediate civilian coercion. What do you require before the Covenant question proceeds? I looked around the hall. 7 houses. Council observers. Terran channels. 23,000 shelter. Personnel. Billions watching. I was still a maintenance technician from Ohio. That felt important. Independent audit. Morvain shook his head. Already requested. Not controlled by treaty stability. Not controlled by House Veyra. And not controlled by Terran's civil infrastructure. Who then? 3 teams. 1 Terran civilian engineering group. 1 Nocturne civilian systems group from a house other than Veyra or 1 neutral station authority. Same raw data. Separate findings. Published disagreements. Ilera nodded. Reasonable. Second, Emily Reeves's medical records are sealed from this inquiry. My behavioral history can be discussed without exposing her private medical details. Agreed, Ilera said. Morvain did not. I looked toward him. If you need my sister's lungs to prove your government acted properly, your argument is already broken. Several Terran observers murmured agreement. Third, every remaining planned infrastructure contingency connected to Project Redirection gets frozen until audit. Hale looked toward Morvain. Morvain said nothing. Dr. Hale? I asked. He exhaled. There are 4 additional contingency packages. The hall erupted. Seraphine turned toward him. Targets. 2 Nocturne transit hubs, 1 Terran repair depot, 1 neutral refugee station. Freeze them, I said. Hale looked toward Morvain. I cannot without executive authorization. Seraphine looked at Ilera. House Veyra can freeze any contingency affecting our own systems. Naira spoke. House Sol can freeze ours. A neutral station representative appeared remotely. We will freeze the refugee station package pending audit. The Terran observer table began contacting Earth. One by one, the contingencies stopped. No heroic gesture. No fleet battle. No dramatic act of domination. Just enough people refusing to let hidden plans remain hidden. The assembly hall became quiet again. Ilera looked toward the house platforms. The succession vote will proceed. Cashin objected. Not while the council sanction remains unresolved. The sanction is now a political cost, not an immediate civilian emergency. Because the human manipulated logistics. I looked at him. You keep using manipulated when you mean explained. Ilera ignored us both. Question before the houses. Is Seraphine Veyra unfit as senior heir because her judgment has been compromised by attachment to Daniel Reeves? The first house voted no. Then the second. House Sol voted no. A fourth abstained. House or remained suspended. The sixth voted no. The final eligible house delayed. The results still passed. Seraphine Veyra retains senior heir status pending independent audit. The hall erupted in overlapping voices. Morvain stood immediately. The council does not recognize this outcome as binding on military command. Seraphine looked at him. It was not a military vote. Your fleet remains suspended. Then it remains shelter infrastructure until audit. You cannot operate indefinitely outside council commission. We do not need indefinitely. Her eyes moved toward me. We need long enough for the truth to catch up. I smiled faintly. That sounds almost human. Do not insult me after I won a succession vote. You won. House Veyra won. Better. Then my wrist terminal chimed. A Terran priority message had arrived through the independent civilian channel. Sender identification made my stomach tighten. Emily Reeves. Seraphine saw my face. Your sister? Yes. Do you want privacy? I opened the message. No. I think this concerns everyone. Emily's voice filled only the small local speaker, not the hall. I chose not to broadcast it. Daniel, somebody from Treaty Stability contacted me 6 months ago. They said they were reviewing Meridian safety failures and asked questions about you. I thought it was routine. I answered some. Not medical details, but enough to tell them you never leave when somebody says a system is failing. I am sorry. There is one more thing. They asked whether guilt makes you easier to control. I told them no. I told them guilt makes you stay, but once you know someone is using it, you get stubborn. I closed my eyes. Of course, she had understood me better than the behavioral model. Seraphine stood beside me without touching me. Daniel, I am fine. That sounded like a lie. 3 out of 10. You are learning. I looked toward Morvain. They asked her about guilt. His expression remained still. Hill looked sick. The House Assembly did not need me to explain what that meant. Project Redirection had not merely studied logistics. It had studied wounds. Mine. Seraphine's. House rivalries. Civilian dependence. Every predictable act of care had been turned into a control variable. The difference now was that everyone could see it. Alara's voice cut through the hall. Independent audit begins immediately. High Arbiter Morvaine's Treaty Stability Authority over Nocturne civilian systems is suspended pending review. Morvaine stared at her. You do not have jurisdiction over my office. No, she said. We have jurisdiction over our systems. You no longer do. Across the hall, Veyra access channels closed to treaty stability one by one. House Soul followed. Then a neutral station authority. Not rebellion. Revocation of permissions that had been granted under trust. Seraphine looked toward me with an expression I had not seen before. Pride, maybe, but not ownership. Not the satisfaction of someone whose mortal had proved useful. Something gentler. You could have ended this by sacrificing yourself, she said. I almost did. Why did you not? I looked at the map, now filled with alternate routes, public costs, and independent choices. Because Meridian taught me to stay for people. It took me 12 years to learn that staying does not always mean becoming the thing everyone else gets to spend. Her crimson eyes softened. Good. That sounded commanding. It was approval. Dangerous habit. Daniel. Yes. Thank you. I looked at her. Careful. We know what that phrase can do in your culture. For 1 second she stared at me. Then she laughed, openly, in front of 7 Nocturne houses, a Galactic Council delegation, and half the fleet. It was the first sound all day that felt entirely free. Then the assembly doors opened, and a council courier entered carrying a sealed executive order. Morvaine read it before anyone else. His expression changed. What? Seraphine asked. The courier activated the notice. The Galactic Council had scheduled a full public tribunal for 6 hours from now. Not merely on the Covenant, on project redirection, treaty stability, house, or involvement, and the legitimacy of Seraphine's defiance. Attendance compulsory for Morvaine, Hale, House Veyra, Terran observers, and one named civilian witness. Daniel Reeves. I looked at Seraphine. Another hearing. Yes. Do I get lunch first? This time, she said. I am making sure of it. Seraphine kept her promise about lunch, which turned out to be more politically significant than it should have been. 6 hours before the public tribunal, she took me to a civilian mess hall aboard her flagship instead of the private command dining room the House Elders offered. Half the tables were filled with engineers, medics, shelter coordinators, and crew members who had voluntarily remained under Nocturne protection after Council suspension. No one saluted her. No one stood. Seraphine carried her own tray and waited in line behind a Terran refrigeration technician arguing with a Varian cook about whether chili required beans. This is your powerful house air strategy? I asked. Eating. I expected more ceremony. You complained about not having lunch. I did. Then I am demonstrating responsive leadership. Dangerous precedent. She looked down at my tray. You chose coffee. Yes. That substance smells damaged. That is how humans know it is ready. She had taken a dark Varian tea and something that looked suspiciously like roast beef with blue herbs. We sat near a window overlooking the shelter docks. Beyond the glass, the Ninth Night Fleet remained motionless under crimson house markings while independent audit teams moved between stations. For the first time in 5 days, no one was actively ordering me into custody. It felt temporary. Seraphine noticed me watching the corridor entrances. Your heartbeat increased. We discussed this. I asked no question. Progress. She waited. I sighed. I do not trust 6 quiet hours before a tribunal. Neither do I. Good. That should not comfort you. Shared paranoia is still sharing. Her expression softened. Then a House Veyra attendant approached our table. Seraphine, Matriarch Alara requests your presence in private succession. Review. When? Immediately. Daniel. The mortal witness is not required. Seraphine looked at me. Do you want to come? The attendant blinked. The review is restricted. Then I will not attend until Daniel has independent security arrangements of his choosing. I stared at her. You were summoned by your matriarch. Yes. You can go. Do you want me to? I am sitting in a cafeteria with 200 witnesses and enough engineers to dismantle the ship around anyone who annoys them. The Terran refrigeration technician at the next table lifted his coffee. Accurate. Seraphine looked at me. Then do you choose to remain here? Yes. Do you want house escort? No, civilian shelter escort. Only if station security recommends it. She turned to the attendant. Tell Alara I will attend. The attendant hesitated. You are leaving him without personal protection? Seraphine's eyes sharpened. He said no. The attendant lowered her gaze. Understood. After she left, I looked at Seraphine. That seemed almost too easy. For me. For you. You think I enjoy surrendering control? I think you are learning faster than the Galactic Council. That is a low standard. She stood. I will return before the tribunal. Do not let your family overthrow you during lunch. Do not repair anything dangerous while I am gone. That sounded like a command. It was hope. She left. 23 minutes later, council security entered the mess hall. Not soldiers. Legal officers. 6 of them in silver-gray uniforms with body cameras already active. The lead officer stopped at my table. Daniel Reeves. Yes. By emergency tribunal procedure, you are being moved to independent witness accommodation until public testimony begins. I put down my coffee. Whose accommodation? Galactic Council Neutral Quarters. Administered by the Office of Tribunal Security. Separate from treaty stability? Institutionally. That was not a yes. The officer remained patient. Mr. Reeves, this is not detention. Can I decline? The tribunal has compulsory witness authority. Can I choose another location? No. Can my counsel accompany me? Counsel has not yet been assigned. Can I contact Seraphine? Direct contact with Commander Veyra is restricted during pre-trial separation. There it was. Same structure. New name. Why? To preserve testimony independence. Has coercion been found? No. Then under mutual war shelter, separation requires either consent or independent judicial finding. The officer's expression changed slightly. The public tribunal supersedes covenant proximity protections. Show me the statute. He produced a legal tablet. Before I touched it, a Varian medic at the next table stood. Civilian shelter witness present. Then the Terran refrigeration technician stood. Second witness. A house sole engineer across the room raised her hand. Third. The officer looked around the mess hall. 200 people had stopped eating. This is unnecessary. I nodded. Good. Then show the statute. He did. I read the first page. Then the second. Then I found the problem. This applies after tribunal admission. Correct. The tribunal begins in 5 hours. Pretrial authority is implied. Implied is not written. The officer looked toward his team. Mr. Reeves, we are trying to ensure your safety. Then ask me what makes me feel safe. Silence. Do you want an answer? He exhaled. What makes you feel safe? Public location. Civilian witnesses. Independent communication. No transfer to an office connected to Morvain. Tribunal security is separate. Then provide written chain of command. That may take time. We have 5 hours. The officer's jaw tightened. You are making procedure difficult. Procedure was already used to predict my death. I am developing preferences. The mess hall doors opened. Seraphine entered without running, but everyone noticed how quickly she crossed the room. Matriarch Alara followed several steps behind. Seraphine stopped 10 feet from me. She did not come closer until she understood the scene. Daniel, council wants to move me to neutral quarters before testimony. Do you want to go? No. Do you want me to challenge the order? Yes. She turned toward the officers. Her entire posture changed. Not into the commander who expected obedience. Into something colder and more deliberate. State authority. The lead officer showed her the tablet. Seraphine read it once. This does not authorize compulsory pretrial separation. The tribunal issued protective instruction. Instruction is not detention authority. We are not detaining him. Then he may refuse. His safety is at risk. From whom? Unknown actors connected to the investigation. Then increase public security. Private accommodation is safer. For whom? The officer paused. Seraphine looked toward Alara. House Veyra requests immediate shelter clarification. Alara stepped forward. Granted. A crimson legal symbol illuminated across the mess hall floor. Seraphine faced the officer again. Daniel Reeves has invoked no military protection, requested no house guard, and refused private transfer. Under reciprocal shelter law, I may not force him to accept my protection, and neither may another authority redefine refusal as incapacity without evidence. Commander Veyra, this is not your jurisdiction. Correct. The officer seemed surprised. Seraphine continued. It is his. She looked toward me. Daniel, state your choice for the record. I remain here until independent tribunal security publishes chain of command and allows council contact. After that, I will reconsider. The shelter symbol brightened. Voluntary witness location recorded. Seraphine turned back to the officer. There is your answer. He looked frustrated. You are obstructing security. No, I am protecting his right to define it. And if something happens to him, Seraphine's face became very still. Then I will carry that fear without converting it into ownership. The words silenced the room. Even Alara looked at her differently. I understood what had changed. For days ago, Seraphine's instinct had been to move me, guard me, decide routes, close doors, and stand between me and danger before asking what I wanted. Now the Galactic Council had given her the perfect excuse to become that woman again. She refused. The lead officer lowered the tablet. We will request clarification from the tribunal. Good. Until then, council personnel will remain at the entrances. I looked at the doors. Publicly. Yes. Body cameras active? Yes. Independent feed? We can provide one. Then stay. The officer stepped back. No one was removed. No one was threatened. The room slowly returned to lunch. Seraphine sat across from me again. Alara remained standing beside the table. You left succession review, I said. It concluded. Did you win? There was no vote. That sounds suspicious. Alara answered. The review asked Seraphine to accept temporary full house authority before the tribunal. I looked at her, meaning every Veyra shelter, fleet asset, and civilian security unit would answer directly to her until the council case concluded. I turned to Seraphine. That sounds useful. It was. You refused. Yes. Why? Because the authority included emergency custody rights over all house-protected witnesses. I understood. Including me. Yes. You could have protected me from the council by making me legally unable to leave house custody. Yes. And you said no. Immediately. Alara looked at her. She did not even permit me to finish describing the strategic advantages. They were obvious, Seraphine said. So was the cost. I stared at her. You gave up the easiest way to keep me safe. No, her crimson eyes held mine. I gave up the easiest way to keep you. That distinction hit harder than anything the council had said in 5 days. Seraphine continued quietly. Daniel, I am done confusing proximity with protection. I looked down at my coffee because suddenly the table was easier than her face. That is inconveniently good. You are avoiding emotional content. Absolutely. Alara made a small sound that might have been amusement. Seraphine looked toward her. You may leave. This is my ship. Technically it is house property, and I am the matriarch. Then voluntarily choose another table. Alara smiled. You are ready for the tribunal. She walked away. I looked at Seraphine. Did you just dismiss your matriarch from lunch? Politely. Your standards are unusual. She was listening. So was everyone. Seraphine glanced around the mess hall. Good. Why good? Because Morvaine's entire argument is that I protect you by controlling you. And you just publicly refused control. Yes. Strategic? Partly. And the other part? She looked at me. I meant it. My heartbeat increased. Her eyes shifted toward my chest. Do not. I said nothing. You were about to. I was going to ask whether you wanted more coffee. Liar. Possibly. We sat in silence for a few seconds. Then a public tribunal alert appeared across every screen in the mess hall. Start time advanced. 1 hour. New evidence entered. I looked at Seraphine. They cut 5 hours. Yes. Why? Alara returned before either of us called her. Her face had lost all amusement. Because the independent audit found the origin of project redirection authorization. The room quieted again. A document appeared on the main screen. Galactic Executive Security Directive. Multi-party approval. Morvaine's signature was there. House or's legal seal was there. A Terran authorization code was there too. I recognized the agency immediately. Terran Civil Infrastructure Corps. My employer. Who signed for Earth? I asked. Alara enlarged the record. The name appeared. Director Amelia Grant. I knew her. Everyone in my division did. She had approved my transfer to Station Halcyon personally. Seraphine looked at me. Daniel. She interviewed me before the assignment. About what? Meridian. Emily. Why I volunteered for dangerous repairs. The final layer opened. Attached to the authorization was a behavioral note written in plain Terran English. Subject Reeves displays high sacrificial response to civilian risk. Expected to remain in failing environment if evacuation would endanger others. Seraphine's face became colder than I had ever seen it. They sold your wound to the council. Looks that way. I am going with you into that tribunal. I looked at her. As my protector? She shook her head. No, her voice became steady. As the woman who will stand beside you while you decide what to do with the people who thought your kindness belonged to them. The public tribunal opened with 11 governments, 7 nocturne houses, Terran observers, the entire independent audit panel, and enough civilian viewers too. Make station halcyon slow its non-essential data traffic. I stood at the center of the chamber beside Seraphine, while Director Amelia Grant appeared on a Terran communication wall nearly 40 light-years away. She looked exactly as she had during my assignment interview 5 months earlier. Gray hair cut at the jaw, dark blue suit, calm eyes, and the professional expression of someone who had spent 30 years making difficult decisions sound inevitable. Daniel, she said, I wish you had contacted me before allowing this to become public. I stared at her. You approved a project that predicted my death. I approved a risk model, with my name attached. Your name was added during operational planning. You interviewed me about Meridian. Amelia's face remained composed. Because your psychological history was relevant to deployment suitability. You asked whether I still blamed myself for what happened to Emily. I asked whether unresolved guilt affected your judgment. Then you sent that answer to the Galactic Office of Treaty Stability. The tribunal displays opened automatically. Independent auditors had authenticated the file. My Meridian work history, volunteer records, overtime reports, emergency assignments, supervisor comments, a behavioral summary translated compassion into variables, high probability of remaining in failing environment if civilian withdrawal incomplete, high resistance to personal evacuation when dependent population remains, guilt-associated response pattern considered operationally reliable. I read the last phrase twice. Operationally reliable. Amelia sighed. Daniel, every emergency organization evaluates personnel behavior. For safety. For deployment. Did you know treaty stability intended to create the failure? Silence. High Arbiter Morvain stood at the council table. The Terran director was not informed of implementation details. Amelia looked toward him. Do not speak for me. That was the first crack in the alliance. Seraphine noticed it too. Then answer Daniel, she said. Amelia's eyes shifted toward her. Commander Veyra, this is a Terran personnel matter. No, it became my matter when your personnel. Fa was used to place a mortal aboard my ship as a political trigger. Seraphine, I said quietly. She looked at me and stopped. No argument. No taking over. Just space. I faced Amelia again. Did you know the environmental system would be deliberately compromised? Not when I approved your transfer. When did you learn? She hesitated. After deployment. Before or after the failure? Before. The entire chamber went silent. How long before? Approximately 9 hours. My stomach tightened. You knew 9 hours before the oxygen recycler failed. I was told a controlled infrastructure event would test Veyra emergency autonomy. Did you know I was still assigned to the sector? Yes. Did you remove me? No. Did you warn me? No. Why? Her composure finally broke. Because I was assured no civilian would be harmed. I am a civilian. You were supposed to be extracted before conditions became dangerous. By whom? She looked toward Morvain. Treaty stability. I almost laughed. The office that predicted I would refuse extraction. Amelia closed her eyes briefly. That was not how the proposal was presented to me. But you had my behavioral file. Yes. You knew I stayed when civilians were still at risk. Yes. Then you knew what would happen. She did not answer. Dr. Marcus Hale stood from the witness table. She knew enough. Morvain turned toward him. Dr. Hale. The Terran authorization was necessary because Daniel's employment contract prohibited undeclared military experimentation. Director Grant signed the exception. Amelia stared at him. You told me the event would remain within standard training parameters. I told you the system would retain automatic safeguards, which you later disabled. Under Morvain's directive. The chamber erupted. The presiding tribunal judge, a neutral Selene magistrate named Orental, struck the control surface. Order. Dr. Hale, do you possess evidence? Yes. He transferred his full project archive into the public record. Authorization chains unfolded across the chamber. House or legal models identified how a human death aboard a Veyra vessel could justify emergency control. Treaty. Stability designed the system failure, and later the transfer hub contingency. Terran civil infrastructure supplied a civilian whose behavior had been profiled in advance. Amelia Grant approved an exception after being assured the event was controlled. Morvain authorized removal of automatic safeguards when projections showed Seraphine was likely to intervene personally. Cashin or supplied the final legal recommendation. I looked toward him. You wanted her to come back for me. Cashin's expression remained hard. We predicted she would. Seraphine's voice went cold. Because of my brother. Cashin said nothing. Alara stood beneath the Veyra crest. Answer her. Cashin looked toward Seraphine. Your service history shows repeated refusal to abandon civilian sectors after the loss of your brother. The model considered that behavior highly stable. I saw Seraphine's hands close slowly at her sides. They had done to her exactly what they had done to me. They had taken the worst day of her life, reduced it to a variable, then designed a system around the certainty that she would never make the same mistake twice. I wanted to say something. She looked at me first. Do not rescue me from this moment. I stopped. All right. Stay. I can do that. She turned toward the tribunal. You studied grief and called it stability. You studied compassion and called it predictability. You created danger because you believed the people trying to prevent it would behave more reliably than the people causing it. Morvain rose. Project Redirection was designed to prevent a larger constitutional conflict. Nocturne fleets have operated beyond meaningful council oversight for centuries. Direct intervention risked civil fracture. Controlled pressure offered a non-violent path to reform. Controlled pressure, I said. You mean civilians. No one was intended to die. You wrote a death projection. Scenario planning. You disabled safeguards. To preserve test validity. You threatened medical routes when I refused to cooperate. To prevent destabilization. I looked around the chamber. Every time a human life appears in your plan, you change the noun. Morvain's face hardened. You are not qualified to judge galactic governance. Good. Then I will judge the maintenance problem. He frowned. Maintenance problem? Your system only works if people cannot see the connections. I pointed toward the evidence. Terran officials thought they were approving a controlled test. House or thought it was providing constitutional analysis. Treaty stability called sabotage contingency planning. The council called sanction stability. Every department renamed its piece until nobody had to say the whole sentence out loud. Oren Tal leaned forward. And what is the whole sentence? I looked at Amelia, Morvain, Cashin, and Hale. They created a dangerous situation around civilians because they believed Seraphine and I could be manipulated by our past into producing a political result. No one corrected me. Morvain tried once more. Even if procedural violations occurred, Commander Veyra's response still proves the central concern. She converted a military fleet into independent shelter infrastructure. She defied council authority. She elevated a mortal civilian into house succession standing. Seraphine stepped forward. Then judge those decisions separately from your crime. Your crime, Morvain repeated. Yes. My choices do not become illegal because your operation exposed them. She turned toward the tribunal. I invoked Nocturne Shelter because the proposed custody system was compromised. The audit proved it was compromised. I retained civilian gate access because council sanctions threatened people unrelated to the dispute. Independent review proved the sanctions imposed disproportionate costs. I accepted reciprocal shelter because Daniel protected house civilians without asking for compensation. Every act is recorded. Review them. Morvain looked toward me. And if the tribunal restores her command, what then? Will you remain attached to a military heir whose decisions you influence? That depends on what we both choose after 30 days. You evade. No. I refuse to promise a future because you want today's legal problem simplified. Seraphine looked at me. Something warm moved behind her crimson eyes. Morvain saw it. There. Personal attachment. Seraphine did not deny it this time. Yes. The chamber went still. I turned toward her. She kept her eyes on the tribunal. I am attached to him. I care whether he is safe. I care whether he eats. I care whether he returns to Earth because he wants to or remains because he chooses to. I want more time with him than these 5 impossible days have allowed. My heartbeat betrayed me so loudly that several vampires in the room visibly noticed. Seraphine finally looked at me. Do not comment. I was going to remain dignified. That would be new. Oren Tal almost smiled. Seraphine faced the tribunal again. Attachment is not evidence of unfitness. What I do with it is. Morvain raised his voice. Then choose. Your command or the mortal. Seraphine's expression became utterly calm. No, the tribunal requires clarity. Your question is false. She stepped beside me, not in front of me. If command requires me to surrender an innocent person to compromised custody, then command is already broken. If Daniel requires me to abandon 23,000 crew members to prove affection, then our bond is broken. Neither has asked that of me. She turned toward Alara. I will accept restoration only if the Ninth Night Fleet returns under independent civilian safeguards, transparent emergency override rules, and House authority that cannot be used to silence protected witnesses. Then she looked at me. And I will continue mutual shelter only if Daniel chooses it after review. No title, no obligation, no promise extracted from crisis. The tribunal judge turned toward me. Daniel Reeves, do you wish to continue protection through the conclusion of this proceeding? I looked at Seraphine. 5 days ago, she had been a dangerous stranger in a crimson coat. Then she became the person who came back for me. Then the person who refused to own the life she had saved. Now 11 governments were watching to see whether I would reduce all of that to a romantic gesture dramatic enough for their records. Yes, I said, until the investigation is complete. Seraphine nodded. No relief disguised as victory. Just acceptance. And afterward? Orin asked. Afterward is ours. The judge leaned back. The tribunal deliberated in public because secrecy had become the very thing on trial. The independent audit was accepted in full. Project Redirection was suspended across all member systems. High Arbiter Cale Morvain was removed from Treaty Stability Authority pending criminal and constitutional review. Director Amelia Grant was suspended by the Terran delegation pending an independent investigation into unauthorized human experimentation and personnel misuse. House or lost Council advisory privilege, while Cashin's role underwent House review. Dr. Hale received protected witness status in exchange for complete disclosure, with his own conduct subject to separate judgment. The Ninth Night Fleet was released from Council suspension, but did not immediately return to ordinary military commission. Instead, the tribunal ordered a 90-day transition under joint civilian, House, and crew oversight. Seraphine retained senior air status. Her command could be restored after the crew voted on the new safeguards. Morvain stared at her as the ruling appeared. You defied the Galactic Council for him and still refused to claim him. Seraphine looked at me, then back at Morvain. That is the part you never understood. Which part? She reached toward me, stopped before touching, and waited. I placed my hand in hers. Only then did she answer. If I had to own Daniel to protect him, then I would only be another version of you. The tribunal doors opened toward the observation deck. Beyond them, the Ninth Night Fleet hung against a field of stars, no longer dark, no longer under emergency seizure, every ship glowing with a mixture of Council white and House Veyra crimson. I looked at Seraphine. So what happens now? Now the crew votes. And us. Her hand remained around mine, gentle enough that I could leave whenever I wanted. Now, she said, for the first time since you boarded my ship, nobody else gets to decide what we are. The crew voted 3 days later. 82% approved the new civilian safeguards, independent emergency review, and limits on external council override. Seraphine accepted restoration of command only after the final crew representative signed the agreement. I watched from the observation deck while the Ninth Night Fleet returned to active status one ship at a time, Council white lights appearing beside House Veyra crimson instead of replacing them. You got your fleet back? I said. Seraphine stood beside me without her old command insignia. The crew accepted my command under new terms. That sounds healthier. It sounds more complicated. Usually the same thing. She looked at me. Your Terran credentials were restored this morning. I saw. Independent civil infrastructure offered you a senior systems position on Earth. I saw that too. Cincinnati is nearby. I turned toward her. You memorized the distance? 107 miles from the office they offered you. That is suspiciously specific. I research. You calculate everything. Unfortunately, 30 days after we shared water in a council chamber, the mutual shelter review arrived without alarms, judges, or 11 governments watching. We stood in Seraphine's private command room. the same place where the entire problem had begun. The oxygen system hummed quietly behind the walls. Her old black field flask sat on the table between us. A legal notice appeared on the console. Mutual War Shelter Review. Continue or dissolve. Seraphine read it once, then looked at me. You should decide first. Why? Because you have the shorter lifespan, fewer political resources, and more to lose if this becomes permanent. Ancient vampire law would be proud. I am serious. So am I. I looked through the command room window toward the stars. I am going back to Earth. Her face remained controlled. Good. The word came too quickly. Good. You miss your sister. You miss home. You have been sleeping badly since arrival. You can hear that. Unfortunately, I am still going back. I know. I let the silence stretch long enough to make her uncomfortable for once. For 6 weeks. Her crimson eyes narrowed. Daniel. Emily threatened to personally contact the Galactic Council if I did not visit. I respect her already. After that, I accepted the independent systems position. On Earth. Partly. I turned the offer toward her. Half the work is remote infrastructure auditing for mixed Terran and Nocturne stations. Someone apparently created a new demand for independent maintenance oversight. Seraphine stared at the contract. You arranged assignments near Veyra routes. They were hiring. Daniel. Fine. Yes. Something softened in her face. Why? Because I want my life on Earth. And I want more conversations with you. She looked away toward the stars. That sounds inefficient. Terrible logistics. You hate terrible logistics. I am experimenting with personal growth. The review terminal chimed again. Daniel Reeves. Continue mutual shelter? I looked at Seraphine. Yes. The white side of the symbol illuminated. Seraphine Veyra. Continue mutual shelter? She met my eyes. Yes. Crimson joined white. Then a second notice appeared. Continuity companion status may be renewed for 1 year. Future Warbride union remains optional by mutual consent. I pointed at the final line. Your legal system is very persistent. We can decline. Do you want to? She looked at me for several seconds. Not yet. Good. That answer sounded suspiciously pleased. I am from Ohio. We are subtle. You are not subtle. I reached for the black flask. Do you remember the first thing you said when I entered this room? I told you civilians were evacuating and you should return to the maintenance deck. No. Before that. She thought. I asked why a human was touching my oxygen console. Exactly. You were touching it. It was configured badly. You insulted my flagship within 30 seconds. And you still gave me water. She took the flask from my hand, filled it, and offered it toward me. This time there were no surrender alarms, no emergency statute, no council cameras, and no accident hidden inside the gesture. I accepted it, drank, and offered it back. Seraphine took a small sip. No ancient law changed. No fleet status shifted. Nothing happened except what we intended. Still tastes strange, I said. It is water. Vampire water. That is not a thing. You have centuries to prove me wrong. She went quiet. Daniel. Yes. You. Will not. I understood what she meant. I would age. She might not. The future we were choosing had an expiration date built into my biology. For once, I did not try to make the truth smaller with a joke. No, I said. I will not. Does that frighten you? Yes. Me too. I held out my hand. Then we do not waste the part we actually get. Seraphine looked at it, then placed her hand in mine. 1 year later, the Galactic Council formally abolished Project Redirection and replaced Treaty Stability's secret behavioral programs with independent civilian oversight. Amelia Grant lost her authority after Terran review. Morvain never returned to executive office. House or publicly withdrew its old legal support for manufactured emergency doctrine. Emily visited Station Halcyon once, hated artificial gravity, and immediately liked Seraphine. I returned to Earth often. Seraphine remained with the fleet. Neither of us abandoned the life we already had to prove the other mattered. When we wanted time together, we chose it. When we disagreed, we said so. When the Covenant offered permanent Warbride union at the end of the year, we accepted only after writing one additional clause in plain Terran English. Neither life belongs to the other. The legal historian complained that the sentence was redundant. We kept it anyway.